Everybody, just having a little trouble getting Stellaris up, but we should be ready to go in just a minute. All right, we've got our quality options. We should be live. Let me hit the play button. At least the game can start loading. And I'd just like to make sure, yes, we do have the updated stream name as well. So we're going to close down Twitch. And we're ready for some Stellaris. So thank you very much for stopping by. I'll admit, this has been a bit of a weird one for me. Actually, we can wait till we're on the game map for that. But as always, I'll get these things out of the way. We are enjoying the Stellaris 3.0 patch, named after Philip K. Dick, with the new Nemesis DLC. And Paradox very kindly did send me a key for this particular DLC. And in fact, this is continuing a fairly long tradition. We've been streaming this game since before Stellaris was released, and with each sort of major and minor DLC released. And they've really, almost all of them have come from Paradox. The ones that I'm running everything but Necroids. And I have been given everything from Paradox except for the Plantoids and Humanoid species pack, which I picked up. They did offer me Lithoids. Generally, I kind of feel like the cosmetic stuff I can cover, because I enjoy playing Stellaris on my own time as well. So in terms of streaming, and particularly taking up what is admittedly a very scarce resource right now, I've been thinking about the amount of time that I spend on streaming on top of all the other things that I want to do. And then, of course, within those blocks, the motivation for that was to think about the different games that I've been playing or committed to play or want to play. And it's tough. I mean, I've tremendously enjoyed Stellaris. There's a reason I requested it, and I'm very grateful that they gave me that key. But it's definitely one of these things where I definitely weigh the value of each of these things I'm requesting, because I am at a point now where I need to sort of say no to stuff and think about how I manage the time better. With all of that in mind, though, it is important to disclose this stuff, because I know that people do make buying decisions based off of Twitch streams. Even the fact of streaming it is kind of viewed as a tacit endorsement. I certainly wouldn't have hundreds of hours in the game if I didn't enjoy it, but it is important for you to sort of make your decision in terms of whether or not that thing of value, that key, is altering my views of the games. We've got Esquano here. Stellaris backwards is Sir Alex. You are welcome. No, it's not. Oh yeah, I guess it is. Hey, Static Saturn. Could you please put a leash on Esquano? It's very good to see both of you. For those of you who do not know, oh my goodness, we've got everybody. We've got everybody in the channel right now. So we've got Static Saturn and Night Valian in the stream. So Static Saturn has very kindly invited me to stop by her stream every once in a while and enjoy Golf with Friends or Gartic Phone. And cool facts. My goodness, there's a lot of you here right off the top. I'm sorry I didn't start earlier. But yeah, let me get the shoutouts out of the way, and that way we can really dig into the playthrough, because I've been feeling a little self-conscious about the lack of sort of progress in terms of the game. That was yeah. So that was an alarm for my tea. Anyways, Static Saturn is a really wonderful broadcaster who I found through Brian on the Rocks, who is a friend of mine from Vancouver. And I've, some of you have gotten a chance to sort of see me go extra hours, because Saturn has kindly invited me for some of the, the multiplayer games, games like Gartic Phone and Golf with Friends. But on top of that, both Static Saturn and Esquano are surprisingly tolerant for my my chat behavior. On top of that, we have got Night Valian 28 in the chat. Night Valian is currently enjoying Sekiro Shadows Die considerably more times than I had originally imagined. And the reason why Night Valiant is saying trying to think of the way to get you killed in a 4X game is pretty much well, it's kind of what I do with Static and Esquano. I definitely have been not offering the most helpful comments during a difficult game in Night Valiant's chat. And the one I felt really bad about, I can't even remember what the comment was. I think it was like, I don't think it was why are you parrying, but oh no, I remember why. He was having, apparently his monitor's broken. So he didn't have his like Twitch settings up. I'm like, oh, is that why the resolution's 320? And he paused the game to double check his resolution, and upon unpausing, he was ripped apart by about 1,000 different projectiles from the boss that he was definitely struggling against and making some reasonable progress before I decided to play my little prank. On top of that, I will mention that Static Saturn has been doing We Happy Few lately, which is not a game I've played particularly far, but it's gotten sort of a second life for me because I have an Xbox now, and obviously Compulsion is both a Canadian developer and one that was acquired by Microsoft, and so I wanted to give it a shot, and I've actually been rather enjoying it. So, anyways, those are some other streamers for you. This has been a weird playthrough overall. I'll try and sort of set the table a little bit, and then we'll jump into the game. So we did a random start. My original motivation was to do a smaller map, thinking that maybe we could get through it a little bit faster and then do something maybe either a little more difficult or try a different species. But it seems like there's a small number of species that sort of started in the game. So one of them was absorbed by the Zaxoid Stellar Confederation, but I think we've got basically one advanced start. There's the Gearoids still around. There's Zaxoids. There's me. So I guess we had 5 to start off with and 2 Fallen Empires. Now the Great Khan really took a big bite out of the galaxy, and so they have split into 2 different factions, the Endurga Successor Khanate and the True Endurga Horde, who presumably do not like each other that much. And my original plan was going to be to try and defang the Vitresis Hive a little bit. And then, I believe it was the Zaxoid Stellar Confederation that decided to go ahead and do a silly thing, which was to open the L gates, which brought out the Grey Tempest. For those of you who do not know what that is a special event that can happen in Stellaris where basically a bunch of Nanites kind of come out to destroy everything. So we've gone from one crisis, the Great Khan, to another. And the real problem with this is that I've been really chomping at the bit to try and start a big war. And I'm having even, there's always been another excuse for me to just turtle up and wait for the opportune time. So this may be a little bit more building oriented. I think I did a couple of. Did I mess up? No. I think we got a reprieve from my. Or did I? Yeah, I messed up a little bit on my trades. Now that I remember. I'm selling too many minerals. And then we're also really far behind on consumer goods, so I need to catch back up on that. But yeah, so I'm going to try and get my economy back in order. I'm definitely going to put a lot into my fleets. We're doing pretty well there, although of course we're buying up a lot of alloys in order to finance that. And then the question will be, if we have a good opportunity with the Vitresis Hive, we will do what we can to hit them. And if we don't have a good opportunity with the Vitresis Hive, then I'm probably going to expand the Empire out to these spots that I haven't claimed yet. I'm going to try and take this little crossroads and basically just build myself up for the inevitable fight against the advanced start. Yeah, I would actually really love to. I'd really love to see a count. I believe We Happy Few actually has a count for the number of people that you kill with a shovel. Okay, let's do a quick audit of the worlds because I've got unemployment problems and it makes me sad. And one answer I might have for this actually is to... well, you know what? If this is a forge world, I'm actually going to convert a few of these into generator districts. Looks like we got the same problem here. So the question would be, what type of a worker do I want on Wentwork Artem? So Wentwork Artem is the this is the Gaia world that we got. So we have put the Wentwork Custodian debuff on it. So the good news here is that we get bonuses for culture workers and researchers. The drawback is that artisans, miners, and gas refiners have penalties. Now, this doesn't mean I can't build industrial districts. It just means that it's not as good at producing these sorts of things. So I have a little bit of a decision. I can do the agriculture district. And while it's not the... like, I don't really need food right now, but this would be sort of the biggest return that I would get per unit. An alternative would be that I build the industrial district. Now, I'm not going to convert this from a tech world to something else, but one thing that I can get out of this would be to convert, like, basically the industrial district, in addition to producing consumer goods, also produces alloys. And for whatever reason, it feels like the Wentwork Custodian does not give a penalty to the alloys. So again, in my opinion, this is undesirable because you get the, essentially you're spending too much to get a good that you could get somewhere else. But that is an option available to us if we wanted. I think I'll probably go for the agriculture district just because hopefully that will free up spaces on another planet. I can also make them administrators, but honestly, like, it is possible to have too many administrators. These are the worlds. Okay, so those are the worlds that have got sort of worker job problems. Those have been dealt with now. Just taking a second here to confirm. There's a couple of other things I want to confirm, which is whether or not I can upgrade certain buildings or whether or not I can build certain buildings. Okay, so this one's going to have a labor shortage eventually too. Unfortunately, that one I don't really have a solution for because we've already sort of maxed out the buildings that we want here. But that's fine. We'll deal with it when the time comes. Wentwork we've already worked on. Yeah, these are fine. I know this is a little tedious for me to run through, but it's convenient for me just because it lets me get all of this work done and I can move on to some of the other things. All right, this one we're going crazy on already. This is a colony, so I think... oh wow, I made these all colonies, but I haven't really assigned what they are. So let's start by making this our next industrial world. This one I can probably get a lot of mining out of if I want. That wouldn't hurt, actually. Okay, so for some reason I went for mineral... well, I think I know why I went for the minerals. yeah, that's exactly why. I'm gonna have to decide on a certain number of city districts. It'd be nice to build the the energy resources. So again, just a quick little bit of logic in terms of what's going on here. I know a lot of people really undervalue minerals. The real logic behind this is just to point out when you have a benefit like this, so, you know, a 15% for minerals from jobs, if you apply this to all of the worlds across your empire, right, at some point you are going to need minerals. Generally, space on its own is not going to give you enough minerals to be worth the effort. And in fact, I actually wound up with a couple of good deals where I could convert my minerals into something else at a much better rate than I could get on the trading, on the market. The only catch is that I maybe went a little too far in terms of what I was pulling out. But basically, to be able to do this, you know, I can take that 15%. That's 6 mineral tiles that I don't need to put on another world that are getting me something a little bit extra. Now, it's a little more complicated because you have things like stability issues. You've got crime. There's going to be some other things that will, or actually just, yeah, I think crime will affect productivity? I can't remember offhand. Anyways, you get the idea though, right? There's going to be some individual factors on a planet that'll mess with your numbers, but all things being equal, if you can play to a planet's strengths, even if it's not enough to sort of say this is a dedicated mining world, you're still able to come out a little bit further ahead. So in this case, this is a tricky one, right? Because I set this up as an agri world because it's really good with farms, but it actually is also arguably a good generator world, just because it doesn't have the largest number in one sector. Doesn't mean that it isn't worth it. Now I have sort of already put the food processing center in, so we will sort of focus on agriculture. But you know, there's another way. In fact, if I find I'm already doing pretty well in terms of food, but if I find that I'm particularly having trouble if I'm having particular trouble in another area, I could definitely convert this into energy. Okay, we've got our Forge World. Sorry, the main thing I want to be focusing on, if I can, is just to make sure that I have enough worker jobs, because those are the ones that I always keep overlooking. A lot of Forge Worlds. Okay, this is a new bureaucratic center. That's what I want. Actually, I should probably consider another bureaucratic center before I go too far. I'm not sure if I wanted to make this one an agricultural district or not. It wouldn't be bad as one. Might as well get the conversion. Yeah, actually, the funny thing is I'm not 100% sure what I want to do with a lot of these colonies. So these ones are pretty self-explanatory. I think if we make this a generator, we get, yeah, more energy credits. That one makes sense. I feel like this one should be another generator-focused planet. Okay, so we've got a lot of good farming worlds, but let's make this an industrial center. So I'm going to hold off on this one because I probably am not going to need to worry that much about food. We've already got 2 industrial worlds, so I'm going to tentatively set this up as a forge world. A lot of this is just to stop me in the future from being a bit of an idiot about this. So, okay, that was exciting. What else do we have? Right, so we want to get a bit of a view in terms of what's happening with the Grey Tempest. I'm wondering whether or not I'm brave enough to send a science ship. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. We'll manually survey these worlds. Okay, they won't let us... Ooh, maybe don't do that. What part of this game can you blame Brian for? Servers are actually pretty good. I would say the combat. This is probably Brian's ideal form of combat, really. One where you just kind of watch your ships go in, rather than you as a player actually doing anything. I have a feeling Brian really likes games like that. All right, so the Endurga successor Khanate has declared the Giroid Empire their rival. I mean, these are small empires sort of slapping each other. Oh, I remember what we were going to do. So there's a war going on, and I don't necessarily want to be coming in on the side of the Zaxoid Stellar Confederation, they're not necessarily they're not necessarily they're not rivals, but ideally making it costly for the Vetresis Hive to fight these guys, that's a benefit to me. So I've been watching the fleets. Oh, interesting. They're just staying put. So basically the plan was I was going I was going to mess with them. So they were originally trying to use my space lanes here to attack the attack this region, and then I closed my borders to them. So I was thinking they would be going back through the Arcturus black hole, but that hasn't actually happened yet. All right, Carabineers, the old with defects. Likely due to the vessel being a civilian transport, the shipboard databases were not scrubbed as part of the fully scrubbed as part of the decommissioning process. So while nothing else of value was found aboard the ship, our data scientists have managed to recover partial references to unknown alien technologies. 10,000 engineering points. So I'm going to keep an eye on what's happening. Just if I can make it so that the AI
Our ships have been improved.
Sort of blunts each other, that's best. If one of them just crushes the other one, that's a problem. But if I'm able to sort of play it so that they I don't believe. If I'm able to play it so that they wind up
our ships have been improved.
Sort of hurting each other, that works great for me.
Our ships have been improved.
You are going to have to get used to hearing that sound, sadly.
Our ships have been improved. Our ships have been improved. Our ships have been improved.
New colony. Obviously, this is going to make our sprawl explode, but it does give us more opportunities to build stuff.
Our ships have been improved. Our ships have been improved.
I do at some point also need to adjust my genetic makeup. Ruined Century Array, that sounds good. At some point in galactic history, the Pesh system evidently supported a vast orbital infrastructure of unusual proportions, which has since been systematically demolished. There are large concentrations of debris in geostationary orbits around most of the planetary bodies in the system, including several massive space station hulks. The largest of these is a colossal Sentry Array. Our initial scan suggests that when it was operational, the array was powerful enough to provide real-time sensor coverage of the entire galaxy. All right, so yet another reason for me to want to try and take the Zaxoid Confederation under my my wings.
Construction complete. Our ships have been improved. Our ships have been improved. We are spreading our faith to a new world.
Okay, so I have at least 2 more citadels to build. Oh, it's been a while since we've done archaeology. All right, Fire in the Sky. The history of Ushikaran 6A and its lost civilization was uncovered, and although tragic by galactic standards, it is sadly typical. A civilization arose, growing in technical sophistication, if not social and political harmony. Eventually, they created the tools of their own destruction and then used them. If the fate of this world and its denizens was not unique, there was something that was, and it captured the imagination of our scientific minds. A ceaseless aurora borealis effect dancing unperturbed above all the devastation. Upon closer study, the aurora effect in the sky displayed repeating patterns, which defies all previous knowledge of weather systems. Is there some message here? Keep digging. So, just to maybe for some context, surface scan of Ushikaran 6A picked up on some signs that a technological civilization may have been active on the planet, but has since gone extinct. We will need to mount a surface expedition to learn more. Barren grounds and vibrant skies. Once down on the surface of Ushikaran 6A, it was clear that a civilization had indeed flourished here until as recently as a few centuries ago. At some point, a sudden and total catastrophic event gripped the world. Apparently, some sort of internecine struggle between nation-states led to a terminal exchange of weapons of mass destruction. Oddly, although the surface is scoured clean and dead, the sky is alive with the shifting hues of a perpetual aurora borealis. It's a striking vista, the desolate steel and stone carcasses of entire cities painted by the vibrant, scintillating colors dancing in the sky. And we can go to the Shroud as well. There's actually one quick thing I wanted to say that's not related to this individual stream. So for those of you who were here on Friday, we finished Cloudpunk. And I have some ideas in terms of what the next game is going to be, but I also asked for some time off on work on Thursday because it is my birthday. And while normally I'd do something like go see a movie or whatever, or I'd go to EXP and Michelle would always insist on me drinking tequila, but that's a few years ago now. I am definitely thinking of adding another streaming day for this week. One thing I do need to mention, I am actually behind on recording this week's YouTube videos, so I'm going to have to do that tonight. But I have been looking for some suggestions in terms of things that people might enjoy. I have some games that I just love playing, and that is probably what I would do under normal circumstances, is just do something that's purely for me. But if anybody has any ideas of something that they might like to see, let me know, and I will, I will take it under advisement. And then if it's like, no, actually go and do something for yourself on your birthday, I will not stream and do that instead. Do keep in mind, though, Wednesday I will not be streaming because of the local game dev meetup. The shroud pulsates with power. It feels like home. Reach into the shroud. Okay, so a flock of spirits glowing with dazzling colors that do not exist in normal space dance around us for several hours as we venture deeper into the shroud. The spectacle is enjoyable until the realization hits us. We are being herded. So there's a few things that we can do here. The way that the shroud seems to have been working in most cases, not all, is we're given 3 options. It seems randomly assigned. I know in some cases we've gotten our big psychic avatar as a easy or as a hard one. It looks like our artifact... No, I think our artifact affects how frequently we get this. Anyways, it doesn't actually tell us the probabilities. So I guess we can just get more often. Anyways, if you fail this stuff, you do potentially get a negative effect. So I've tended to go for the happy... I tend to go for the high probability ones unless there happens to be something like really, really desirable in some of the lower ones. So sensor range... I really like sensor range. It would be very helpful with the Grey Tempest. I don't like sensor range enough for the chance that something bad will happen to me instead. Army morale, we're not really going to be invading worlds anytime soon, although I do need to get my army sort of up and running. I've been neglecting it for a while. So in this case, we'll go for happiness, and happiness does have some productivity benefits, so in this case, it's not a disaster to go for it. It's just not the first thing I would have picked. Boon bestowed. The powerful energies of the Shroud have flooded into the communal psionic link that is shared between all Umetharians. A profound sense of calm is spreading throughout the Black Codex, and it seems to affect even those without psychic abilities. So for 60 months, we've got a 25% bonus to happiness. Once we have 14, I do want to take Arcturus just so that I can have these claims and be done with them. Following that, we will start expanding out into other systems again. And again, I'm fine with minor military sanctions because this makes me more powerful as a council member. Although intriguingly, the Vitresis Hive is not on board with it. Okay, well this is great. So Taiga was one of the systems that we were really pushing. To get. So that's 2 new planets we can add to the roster. And I think that might also be out of the worlds that I can immediately colonize. I believe that's the last of them. So obviously we've got some colony ships that need to make their way. But we no longer have... we're no longer motivated by sort of planet acquisition in terms of our expansion. Now, in reality here, because I do have the ability to terraform, it probably makes sense for me to claim Jompron and Ninjil and such. Actually, if it's a tomb world here, I may not be able to do anything with it.
Complete.
Okay, some new colonies. So I've got my usual sort of shake and bake colony that I make. We do. Does anybody know? So that's actually it's a minor sci-fi reference, but does anybody know where shake and bake colonies come from? But in any case, it's I usually just put down the gene clinic to try and overcome the penalties for growth that my species has. Then I put a temple down for the unity, and then we build a city district so that I can add basically another expansion. In this case, I've got a crystal forest, so I want to build an extractor for the crystals. This definitely lends itself towards industrial centers, although I'll probably build up the generator districts because more money is always good. And then we've got 2 Chalks Primes. That's not going to get confusing at all. Yeah, it's pretty much the same start for each colony that I make, and I suspect that we're going to be running into a number of those. Another thing that I need to that I sort of need to focus on, and we talked about this last stream as well. I've currently got 14 out of 18 of my star bases built, and
the faithful have claimed a new world.
Man, maybe I need a better naming convention. So anyway, sorry, before I carry on too much. So one of the things that I'm split in a little bit in terms of how to build these extra. Sorry, what am I trying to say? I've got my. I want to make. I want to make my like I want to make my trade routes secure, and there's a few different ways that I can do that. I'm actually going to be getting that as under my like not my ascensions, my civic or my unity perks. But one of the things is because I'm building all these additional colonies, the shape of this trade network is potentially going to look very different than what it was before. So I've been holding off on building these extra star bases just simply because, as nice as it would be to build star bases in areas where I can get the extra unity for having a black site, I might actually want to build them for for defending trade. And the nice thing about the ones that defend the trade is that I can usually stick some more anchorages on them, and as a result, I'll just have a bigger navy to work with. Oh yeah, actually it occurred to me there's a couple of other things that I want to do with my other planets. I think it's Tertius. So I was debating for a second, is like, originally want to call it Secundus because it's like a moon. So Tertius would presumably have been this, but I don't know. It's the 3rd colony, we'll call it that. I'm assuming there's like 500 people who know Latin just waiting to see this video. It usually happens with YouTube. I say like one thing wrong. There's like 500 people on YouTube who are all like, "Oh, you idiot! That's not it. Why did you do that?" Ah. Okay. But yeah, so here's what the trade network looks like. And the big problem is that we've sort of got a main trade column, which is insanely valuable. So even though it's protected by some star bases, like the max piracy is sort of minus 50 in some of these regions. So there's sort of a weak spot here. Now, Kajalam will hopefully help out with most of that. I'm really uncertain what I'm going to be doing with these. And then this is a little bit less alarming, simply because like these are sectors, like it's not within my borders. Of course, it's not. It's not something. Likewise, Saldanope, right? Saldanope isn't a problem because, because there's a lot of trade going through it. It's a problem because it's lawless space. So this is a little bit of a motivation for me, right, to finally get these holes plugged in instead of going for something like Jompron or Ninji. And again, I kind of gotta figure that out for myself. However, it did just occur to me that I can finally do the claim that I wanted. But I paused for a specific reason, which was to bring one of my people back home. Where's Wentwork? So we're gonna put this to work as a scientist. So let's also take a minute here. I think we've got enough for another citadel. Okay, these upgrades are already happening. Aranis. I don't recall... Yeah, Yanin is already on its way back to its former self. And then I suppose I can take a look at my existing fleets. So we're 138. Interesting. What's going on here then? So we've got the salvage, the Nova. I don't know if I want the psionic avatar to be...
The faithful have claimed a new world.
Okay, fair enough. But yeah, I want these ships sort of patrolling what I can of the trade. Now, actually, you know what? Better still, I can start them in Botin. And then we can get them patrolling a little bit further. Okay. So let's do our usual... Again, we're sort of paying... Not exactly paying the debt, but we're dealing with the consequence of all the expansion that we did a little bit earlier. I'm also going to break some of these down into sectors when I can. So more stricter control of RNA and protein production on a cellular level. So I don't necessarily want just another ascension. Wait a minute. Huh. Colony development speed is actually not a terrible idea here. The command limit would also be nice, but I think in this case here, because we're already... Like, it's 30 months, so we might already be past the point, but it seems here, like, if there's going to be a time for colony development speed, and the extra building slots for that matter, it's probably now. So let's do Durasteel infrastructure. Admirals gained a trait. They are now... Oh, I don't even remember. Unyielding, psychic, and aggressive. And the more important thing, we have now got a big shift that we can make. So I think I was waiting for... my... Right, yeah, so we were waiting for our second trait point. So there's a few things that we can do, right? We can gain additional traits. So... You know, I could do Ingenious for the extra energy credits. I could try and get some more science. What was another one that I was thinking might be desirable? I guess there isn't anything really related to my Empire Sprawl. I think I'm just going to have to learn to deal with that. Or I can finally get rid of the thing that's... Now, we've obviously dealt with our slow breeders problem for a while now. But... I don't necessarily think it's wrong to want to try and pursue some more growth here. So I think what I'm going to start with in terms of my genetic modifications is actually to get rid of the slow breeders penalty. Now, this is going to be a really tricky one to apply sort of universally. So in this case, we'll remove it. We'll apply the template. And again, the best here is really if I don't know if I can collapse. Yeah. So in this case, it's 327. Maybe that will also be affecting the ones who have less housing usage? No, sorry. The conservationists, maybe? So we gained the psychic. We gained bioadaptability somehow. These were the 3 I started with. Anyways, yeah, so applying the template. This is going to take a lot of social research, but it's worth tailoring our genome. And then, of course, this will just simply mean more production overall, which is good. It does also mean, too, that for a few of my planets, I'm going to be able to get some of these changes that I wanted done. Okay. What do I want to do with my base workers? I can try and find a space for them. You know what? Okay, let me just work this out for a second. So it looks like, I think it's about 2 jobs for each of these basic buildings. So we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. Yeah, I've got more than enough housing. Okay, so we're going to start converting these into generators. Although I guess that doesn't really fix anything. Yeah, sorry, I should have thought that through. So I still think it's the right call. In fact, I'm going to go one further. But it's still too, like, if you take a look at my breakdown of workers, it's like two worker jobs trading out the other ones. You gotta wonder how controversial genetically modifying an entire sapient species would be. I mean, like, we don't do it in the way that you see it in science fiction stuff, but a lot of our... Oh, I'm sorry, the sapient is the key part to what you're saying there. Like, I don't know, like, I guess there's old movies like Gattaca, which are definitely very critical of it. But I think that there's been a lot of genetic modification that we've done, you know, in history. And, I mean, I suppose it depends on what you... Like, obviously, the picture that they have there is pretty suggestive, right? Like, it definitely looks like a really invasive procedure. But on the other hand, right, if someone were to say, it's like, you know, hey, we've identified a gene that causes cancer, and what we're going to do is we're going to eradicate this gene from, you know, from the human species. I mean, obviously now we live in a time where even vaccination is a controversial point. So I suppose there's going to be those times when, you know, people are just gonna like be angry, and there's very little that you can do to change it. But I don't know, like I kind of have to assume, like in this case here, we're removing a negative trait for our species. I suppose you can almost say, like, here we're reversing the one child policy. Now, I mean, practically, how does this make sense? You know, in terms of the Black Codex, because originally the slow growth was like to represent the fact that it's really hard to join in. Maybe we're just getting a critical mass. Like, this is one thing that kind of interests me. This is related to my, like, personal studies that I find interesting. So, think about what's happened with work from home and COVID-19. And I know a lot of people watch Twitch and stuff like that to escape discussions in this. Hopefully this will be original and interesting enough to sort of not be a, oh God, they're talking about the pandemic again. But I'm really interested in creativity. I think most people probably are. They're at the very least interested in the results of creativity. And it is definitely true that there will be sort of creative clusters. There's something very interesting in the fact that, you know, you wouldn't necessarily think that, like, if you think about it on your own, I don't personally believe that there is like some magical trait that you're born with that makes you creative. I don't really think that falls in line with what most people, like, if you actually look at people who you usually associate with creativity, you tend to see a lot of hard work. But there is this very persistent idea that, you know, geniuses are just sort of born, and all we can do is stand in awe of these strange, mysterious creatures. So, but let's put it to you this way. I think it would be fair to say, on its own, whether you believe that, creative people are sort of made, or whether there is some sort of inherent talent that just simply comes out. And like, don't get me wrong, like obviously if you are inclined to doing a certain thing, that's going to motivate you to want to do the practice and get good at the thing, right? Like if you're really into computers when you're little and you follow that passion all the way through, you're probably going to be somebody who has better potential to do something really special and influential with computers in the future. But I think it would say wherever that comes from, I think it would be fair to say that might be, there's no reason to believe that would be unevenly distributed inside of the population, right? Like I don't know about being born in like Grand Forks, BC, or being born in Toronto would necessarily make you any more or less disposed to have those characteristics. Yet it is also true that we do really seem to have a lot of creative people, innovators, inventors, coming out of these rather dense cities, and not just simply because we're talking about like, well, there's lots of people there, so you'd sort of see a higher rate. Actually, one really funny thing is the director, Edward Diemtrich, actually came out of Grand Forks. So I suppose that's a counterexample, maybe? I don't know. But it does seem to be like beyond just simply proportions that you'd find in the normal population. It does actually seem to be that large cities do seem to generate a lot of these creative types. And I think it's fairly easy to see why, if you are sort of trying to establish yourself. You generally will go to these places where the action is happening, right? You'll have, Paris and these groups of artists that, sort of crop up and form these movements. There's an exhibition at the National Gallery right now, Rembrandt in Amsterdam, talking about sort of the effects of kind of the first great age of globalization and how that created this market and this environment for painters like Rembrandt to operate. And the rivalries that came out of that as well, sort of this new social class that wanted to be painted, and all the people who wanted sort of their piece of the action. And the other, you can also take some of the anecdotes. So things like Pixar, the Pixar building having these, like being designed to sort of have these communal spaces where people wind up bumping into each other. So what's interesting here, of course, is that, Paradox, who makes Stellaris, I know EA at the very least, there's a bunch of companies which are now working from home. We are moving away from environment, involuntarily perhaps, but moving away from some environments in which you are in close proximity to your collaborators. And whether or not we return to that is sort of beside the point, but what would interest me is whether or not there's a shift that happens in terms of, do we wind up seeing sort of a bump in terms of these, I don't want to say influential, but like, all of a sudden does this actually wind up sort of spreading things out? Like, have we found a way to sort of crack the code of these creative clusters, and now is the new normal one in which we'll start seeing? So for instance, there's like the dirty rectangles thing that's going to happen tomorrow for Ottawa. Is that going online? Has that allowed sort of what is happening to create these centers? Is that happening online? Or are we missing out on the benefits that come from that? And obviously this is just kind of academic interest to me. This is actually a very practical interest to companies like Paradox, companies like Apple, companies like EA, because if you, like, these are companies that really do rely on people performing at a very high level, and to do things that don't necessarily have an easy formula, right? So I'm really interested to kind of see what what some of the effects are. I'm particularly interested to see whether or not they're like, I hate to say it, but like pandemic art, like what does that look like? Is there some evidence that maybe these clusters weren't as important as they were before? Or did we miss out on something by not having people be able to sort of connect with each other over that period? I don't have an easy answer for that one way or the other. But it's one I was a little curious about. Now, I am completely lost as to why I brought that up. Sorry. I remember it was something related to something I saw inside the game, but I don't remember. I'm also trying to pick sectors right now. So Nishpan is probably the most likely for... Okay, so Nishpan will turn you into a sector. Limsa's already made a sector. Oh, that's surprising. I would have thought Drom would fall into that as well. I don't just want the governor bonuses. It's a little bit easier to just look at these things if they're all... Okay. So we've got Chalks, Hawaz, Usha Karen. Oh, it's being terraformed. Yeah, so the big challenge here, what is it? Within 4 jumps. So 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4. Okay, yeah, Chalks is the new capital. Apparently Chalk Secundus became the capital, though. So I figure we'll probably be able to get at least... Well, maybe not, actually. Oh yeah, so if I make... Tea's already a capital. My bad.
The spirits have granted us new wisdom.
Scientist Seri de Den has died at age 138. Okay, so let's try and get one of our other scientists who's on a ship first. This is the most qualified. Of course, we still need to get a replacement for the science ship, but... Do you like alloys? Do you like metals and gases, hard workers, precious metals? Yes, we thought you might. What can you offer us? Look, this ally, the weight, the luster, the glow. Have you ever seen such metallic bonding? Incredible yield strength, maximum grade, nominal impurities. We can feel it. It calls to you. We will give you 2,000 alloys if you grant us 55 rare crystals. How many do I have? 3.9 thousand. I think we can handle that. Certainly we accept your deal. So I'm going to put this into a another citadel just because those take a while to build and they're expensive. And we've got advanced strikecraft, so a further refinement in strikecraft design. These advanced strikecraft are a pilot's dream. Their performance far exceeds that of previous models. So if I can, it's always very tempting to go for the bonus for research, particularly when my sprawl is so high, but if I have low cost techs, I want to consider those as well. The Gauss cannon is very tempting here, but I'm going to go for the mining station output just because it's so inexpensive. Before I spend my alloys, it looks like I can afford another citadel, so let's start with that, Aranis. Oh, we're actually done our citadels. Well, that's a welcome. Oh, no, we're not. Okay. And before I go too much further, I want to try and get those fleets back up and running. So we've got Vernala. I guess I can do it. Okay, so Decini will send for the upgrade. Vernala, what was the deal here? So we're going to do another battleship. Let me just make sure that I got this right. Was it just a battleship and 2 cruisers? Because it says it's 5 above if I do that. Where did I go wrong? I don't think there's any ideological reason to go for a particular type of weaponry. You can definitely sort of imagine religious orders not wanting to do a certain... So, like, you know, there's I think if it's Sikh religions, like, you can't take the knife out without it tasting blood. I think there was something like... There's definitely precedent for, you know, trying to come up with certain rules in terms of warfare. I think definitely you'd probably see the Black Codex as more sort of Sun Tzu types who would prefer to see their you know, they would prefer to achieve their goals through other means. What do you think looks cooler? I mean, I suppose there's a certain elegance to a laser. I never really put that much thought into it, though. How did I break this down last time? So normally it's like 6, 12, then we do 24 destroyers. I don't see that happening, though. I actually wonder why these numbers got so twisted. I don't know, we'll chuck a couple more Corvettes in, I suppose. So 2 cruisers and 4 Corvettes. I'll stick that right to the top of the queue. Okay, well, we've got a bunch of food to sell. So let's just straight up sell the 10,000. Obviously, I need to boost my my consumer goods purchases, though. God, have you beaten the sun yet, or whatever it is you do in this game? Yeah, actually, Quanta, your rebuke, not exactly, but it's well pointed. This has actually been a very strange game for me in the sense that this has been very slow in terms of progress. I've been largely left alone in the galaxy, and there's not a lot that's been happening. So what isn't obvious is this used to be owned. I'll maybe give you an idea in terms of the setting. There's a few things that can happen in the game. So there's a victory condition. Currently, victory is not possible because there's a crisis going on. But if you reach, I think it's 2,500, and you have the top score, you win. We're on our way there, but there's a couple of big ancient empires that are, that are in our way. But what's happened right now is there's this little part of the galaxy here called the L cluster, and it turns out that the things that were the way that you access the L cluster, the L gates, were locked for a reason, and they're holding... You know how people kind of talk about the gray goo, like the idea of like these self-replicating machines that will like consume everything? Well, it's hiding... It was concealing that. So the Zaxoid Stellar Confederation opened the door, came pouring through. Right now, I don't see them eating too much else for the time being. But I'm a little worried, and so right now we're trying to survive that. Although overall we're not near an L gate, so I don't have that much to worry about. If there was a slave, I missed it. I also have a feeling that I haven't done any construction. But yeah, because of stuff like that, like there's always been a really good excuse for me not to do anything in this game for the last little while. And so as a result, I've been playing very passively. Although, again, it's worth mentioning that we've gone from being a pretty unimpressive power to one that, at least in terms of scores, is ranking fairly high. Whether or not it'll count for anything when the wars actually start is another question, but. Is our 7 months before we convert the species. All right. Hidden in plain sight. The enigma of the repeating aurora borealis patterns was explained after scanners detected small machines in orbit around Ushikaran 6A. Some of these devices were intercepted and analyzed. It was established that the machines could manipulate the atmosphere by firing streams of charged particles into it, emulating solar winds. The patterns were basically code ciphers sent to beings on the surface. The theory is that the system was in use roughly at the same time as the global crisis took place. Coded communications in a time of war, perhaps instructions to saboteurs or detonation signals for weapons hidden in plain sight. Without anyone to turn them off, they loop into infinity. Oh, that's a bunch of social research that'll help us ascend. You actually played this game once upon a time. Even with your description, you still don't know what you're supposed to do. I don't know. Have you, out of curiosity, Esquano, have you ever played any of the other Paradox games? Because it's like Paradox has done a pretty good job of making sort of a market for themselves. It's hard to think, like, there are other wargame publishers for sure. So Slytherin is one that comes to mind. Oh, right. I remember now when I was talking about creative clusters. I was like, things like, why does Sweden have so many, like, interesting game developers? There's, like, Fat Shark, there's Massive, there's, Sweden there. That's not exactly an example of a creative cluster, because obviously that's, like, countrywide, but anyways, that's later. Couldn't tell you don't pay attention to these things. Fair enough, yeah. So the thing about, the thing that I think Paradox has done a really good job of for these games, and they're getting better at it over time as well, is that they don't necessarily shy away from the complexity of a game. As you can see, there's lots of menus. So for instance, if I want to see what's happening on a planet, I've got modifiers, I've got buildings I can build, I've got another set of buildings that don't seem to be related to these buildings I can build. There's a population, some of them are slaves, some of them are not. If you want to know how to make them slaves, you actually have to go to another window over here, and then you can set their right. Like, needless to say, this is not like Destiny. And like Destiny's not necessarily an easy game either, because you have all sorts of loot, lots of stats to take a look at and all of that. But like, it's fair to say that the edge that Paradox sort of gotten for themselves is that they haven't shied away from that kind of complexity. I do think they do a very good job of trying to create user interfaces that will communicate a lot of this complexity to you in a way that I think I personally would prefer a lot of other strategy and war games to learn from. So for instance, I would love to play Shadow Empire and Dominions 5. I've actually really enjoyed a couple of rounds of Dominions, and I'm sure I will actually really enjoy Dominions, Shadow Empire when I get the time to spend with it. But like, this is something that really takes some effort for me to learn. I'm assuming like probably if I played more SSI games or something like that, I would maybe appreciate the games a little bit more in terms of their user interface. But they're also very complicated games, but they're presented in this very opaque way. So the trade-off with a Paradox game seems to be that the complexity is going to be what gives you hundreds of hours in a game like this. But there is also an ask, which is, you're going to have to kind of, it's like a rodeo. You kind of see how long you can stay on the thing. So one of the things that I've been doing for this for myself is just I make up these fun little science fiction stories. Like right now I've got my, pseudo cult / codebreaker group And that's kind of determining some of the decisions that I make. And sometimes it's fun to just see how the galaxy turns out. Other times, I'll have a really specific idea. Like, so one example I would give you is, like, for me, because I've been playing a lot of Megacorps, I've been ignoring Empire Sprawl. And what might be interesting for me in a future playthrough is to say, it's like, okay, I want to work on Empire Sprawl. I want to see how I can keep that under control throughout the playthrough, not let it explode and just not care as things go by. So once you gain a certain degree of sophistication with these games, you also tend to just find that you will make your own goals as you go along, and that can be sort of be its a reward of its own. But yeah, like it's definitely these ones. It's kind of a blessing and a curse in my view on these kinds of things where. Tatergator, first of their name. Thank you very much for the follow. Sorry, what am I trying to say? Like, kind of, some of that already assumes that you know the systems well enough that you're sort of, you're okay throwing yourself against it a few times to see where it all goes. But again, assuming you're willing to jump on, it's a really rewarding experience for me, at least. So I'm taking a second here. I want to see if I can find another administrative planet. And cool facts. Am I mistaken? I thought that I went over my species with you when you were on a previous time. I don't mind showing them again. But I was sort of under the impression that we might have done this already. Normally I like to leave that for the end of the stream when I, when I can kind of go to the main menu. Because there's lots. Like there's one that I sort of based off of cargo cults. There's one that I based off of a Johnny Walker commercial. There's every species I can show you at the end, but like every species that I've made, I've kept, and every single one of them has like a write-up. I was hoping that I'd get two administrative centers, but I might be short. There's also a lot of really good resources available on some worlds, so.
We are spreading our faith to a new world.
Interesting. Okay, so the Zaxoid Stellar Confederation has ended our treaty because they lack the alloys to maintain it. Interesting. I should see how that affects... I'm assuming there's going to be some big jumps here. We'll wait till the end of the month. Council election is imminent. The council election will be held in 177 days. Current top candidates. So the Vitresis Hive still beat us by about 1,020 points. We've cleared the Zaxoid Stellar Confederation. So this will be the time where, at some point, where was it? In the structure of the galaxy... Actually, you know what? Now that I think of it, there's a couple of... things that I want to do. So one is related to the... one's related to the council size. So I'd like to change the size to 2. I think I actually have the power to push it through because the Vitresis Hive is okay with it. What? Nominate the custodian. Oh god, this is amazing. It's participating in the galactic community beneficial. You always find you have other things you need to want to do and dismiss it most of the time. You know, Tatergator, you are raising a really good point, which I've actually had some difficulty with myself. I was actually just about to talk about this, so it's a good question. So the one thing that's definitely true for me is trying to think of the best way to put this. Like, I very strongly believe that the biggest thing about these games is that everybody's going to sort of have their own, take on the game and they're going to have their own interests. And I think like that's fine. And you're probably going to get some different feelings in terms of how this goes. But here's I think the thing that makes the galactic community particularly thorny for people, and it's definitely the biggest thing I run into in terms of my own choices. You have a fairly scarce resource in influence. There's only a certain amount that you're going to earn every turn. You can boost it up a little bit more by managing your factions well. You can sort of reduce the leakage by not having things like non-aggression pacts and whatnot. But the fact of the matter is that, there's only so much that you can get in terms of influence at any given time. And what are the actions that influence can do for you? Well, influence will get you additional systems. Generally, in a war game, you want to sort of paint the map red and own everything. That's definitely what I'm doing here. I've obviously got a fairly big chunk of the galaxy to myself. You will also use it to get claims on your neighbors, right? And it gets very expensive after a while. So this cost me 100, and I'm not that far from from my borders. So if you want to propose something, it's costly. If I want to put in 5-year plans, it's going to cost me 150 influence, and there's the possibility that other people may not support it. So there's a couple of reasons why you would find this helpful. For instance, it was not true for the entire time that I was playing this so I was relatively weak at the start of this playthrough, and it was not true for a while. I don't know if I have a good way of showing this, but there used to be a lot more diversity among the species. Everybody is now spiritualist. Actually, sorry, I think the exception to that is the Endurga Khan. These came out of the Great Khan event. But I believe it's actually partly through the galactic community that resulted in this shift, because I believe it is the there's one where it's like, no, it can't be Comfort the Fallen, is it? Tithe of the Soulless. Okay, no, I guess it was Comfort the Fallen. So there's a plus 10% towards spiritualist ethics. So basically, except for the Vitresis Hive, which is a hive mind and can't become spiritualist, everybody eventually slowly became spiritualists. That was helpful for me because it made it a lot easier to sort of form these non-aggression pacts with people and sort of give myself a little bit more security so that I could grow out and become quite strong. Then, of course, there's the other benefit where if there's something that you do particularly well or you would like to see a bonus for, and particularly something that will undermine an enemy, that's another really big improvement as well. So what I'm thinking of here is we've got something like mutual defense, the readied shield. So diplomatic weight from fleet power. Well, maybe you don't care about diplomatic weight if you don't want to engage. But being able to get a boost to your naval capacity plus 10 and ship upkeep plus 5 might be beneficial for you, or it might actually be really difficult for you. Here's an example of how this can become very subtle. A 10 naval capacity is going to mean very little to an extremely large opponent, but it can mean the world if you haven't been putting something into anchorages. So think about what happens if you pass the readied shield and you have a large, somewhat aggressive neighbor. Basically, for a cost of 100 influence, your naval capacity goes up. Usually, well, again, we assume that you're small, so by a significant amount. 10 is pretty big. I think your starting one is 20, right? So, and then the other thing that it gives you is a penalty to ship upkeep. It costs 5% more. And because it's percentage-based, if you're a small power, you'll see a higher cost, but the costs are going to be quite small compared to your larger aggressive neighbor. Now, it's also possible that your larger, more aggressive neighbor also has sort of the alloys to back it up, but you can sort of see how there's some nuance in terms of what some of these things will do. I actually really agreed to this at the time because I just needed to get my naval capacity up. And you notice it kind of continues along similar lines, right? The Military Readiness Act, it gives you a fixed amount in terms of naval capacity. but the ship upkeep keeps going up in terms of percentages. Another thing that was added in, I don't know if it was added in Nemesis or if it was added in the Dick patch, which is the free update that comes along with it, would be, it was the one that I was interested in, which was the, not sanctions, galactic reforms, to nominate the custodian. So when decisive action is needed, a member of the council can be elevated to the position of galactic custodian. The custodian is granted special powers and can provide new and powerful resolutions. Yeah, well, and this is the thing. This is actually what makes this system so interesting. But it's also a really hard, like, if you don't... So here's the thing, right? We're talking about how Paradox games can be very complex. And I think they do a good job of still showing you the information, but you still, like, there's still some work involved, right? If you take a look at... If you take a look at sort of how this is going... So, for instance, here's a great example. Ban organic slave trade. Now, I don't necessarily go out of my way to get slaves, but I don't want to ban the organic slave trade because every once in a while my population seems to pop up in the slave trade, and I can buy them back and put them on a planet that I want. So banning that organic slave trade will mean that I'm not able to do that. I'm not able to boost my population as a consequence. Where was the other example that I had? Oh yeah, Tithe of the Soul. Tithe of the Soulless is a pretty obvious one. So it's a less diplomatic weight from tech. That I'm maybe not so worried about. Spiritualist ethics attraction. Well, maybe I don't want to be friends with everybody. Unity from jobs is a big one, so that's a bonus towards me, obviously. It helps reduce my consumer goods upkeep, which I'm currently in a deficit on. But more importantly, the population assembly costs and robot upkeeps go up. So, while let's pretend here that the Archivists were a rival power instead of a fallen empire, clearly this is going to savage their ability to grow. And so it winds up becoming, in this case, this is something that allows me to convert influence into something that will give me a bit of an edge. Again, it's a little bit more about sort of nudging. If you've ever played the game Democracy by Positech, who actually wrote something kind of mean on a blog I wrote once, so it's hard to recommend, but that's fine. I mean, the game's fun, right? I still like playing Democracy, even if I think the guy's maybe a little quick to comment on articles they clearly haven't read. But if you play Democracy, it's really similar in the sense that you'll pass a policy, but the effects of it are going to take a long time to realize in certain cases. I know that's what the social engineering DLC was about. But it can be a very satisfying way of playing if you like thinking long term. So your biggest problem in your playthroughs is that the proposal queue gets flooded and you have a hard time justifying the expense to propose anything. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that will help you out there will be growing your diplomatic weight. So in this case here, we're on, there's the Senate floor right now. So you'll notice that the Vitresis Hive has got 10k power. I've got 9.1. And then what do the rest of the factions have? Well, there's 6 and then 1.4k, so that's 7.4. And then we've got 1.9. If I want, I could say it's 9.4. It's actually 9.3, but sometimes it's easier to just round it. And then we've got the 3.9. So the funny thing here is that I believe if you... I believe I basically just need one other faction to be able to push something through, if I'm not mistaken. That's actually... No, sorry, I think things shifted. There was a while where it used to be that I only needed one other supporter to be able to get something to pass. But it's like you can also still mess around with this a little bit too. So it'll tell you specifically what's affecting your diplomatic weight. And if you've noticed, so for instance, we've got so if I wanted to wield more influence in the galactic community, take a look at the Vitresis Hive. Here it says that for their diplomatic weight based on fleet power is 4,267. That's up from 3,282, and that comes from fleet supremacy and the readied shield. Whereas if you take a look at my base value, well, I'm getting 2,479 from my overall fleet power, 2,066 from the readied shield. So in this case here, basically the Vitresis Hive are getting about 1,000 extra diplomatic weight from their fleets due to some of the, some of the different texts that have been, or some of the different resolutions that have been passed. So if I want to sort of cut their diplomatic power off at the knees, maybe I would want to consider removing the readied shield. And it's like, okay, well, why do I want the diplomatic power to work the way that it does? It's like, well, let's say all of a sudden I want to start changing the council size to 2. Democracy is best in small doses, after all. And in fact, let's say that after a certain period of time, maybe 2 is a little too crowded. Maybe I just want it to be 1. Well, in that case, I'm going to want to maximize my own influence, and I'm going to want to make sure that people who would vote against me don't do that. Thank you so much for the subscription. I'll just let the Ark of the Covenant have its way, and then we'll finish the thought. So essentially, what can happen here is I can say, it's like, okay, so maybe there's some resolutions that I want to pass. The game will already tell you under the, under the different things that you can pass, like whether or not there's support for it. But in addition, you can actually try and wield a little bit. Once you start getting your diplomatic weight up, your sort of endorsement of a particular measure will allow you to push it up. And then, of course, if you're willing to, you can propose, you can make something an emergency measure, or you can veto as well. So there's definitely a lot of things that you can do in the galactic community, but your original observation is a very true one, which is that influence is arguably the most scarce resource in the game. And so you want to have a very clear strategy in terms of how you want to use it in the galactic community, because it can be very easy to see how it gets tossed away. So yeah, no worries. It is an extremely unusual subscription notification, but I've got it. It's been there for a while, and I'm not quite sure what to replace it with yet. Okay. Speaking of my strategy with the galactic slave trade, that's how I get more researchers. But yeah, like this is the thing, right? And this is kind of true for a lot of stuff in Stellaris. Eric Slayton, thank you very much for the follow. This is true for a lot of stuff in Stellaris. You can enjoy. So I have enjoyed playing Stellaris without engaging very deeply with the with the galactic community. I definitely nudge it into ways that I think are helpful for me. But I don't necessarily go all in because I'm usually using my influence for something else. I do think with Nemesis, because they've allowed you to sort of declare crises and sort of make yourself the defender of the galaxy and whatnot, the galactic custodian. I think that has started to make the system maybe a little bit more interesting. But again, it's just one of these ones where if you're going to spend a couple hundred influence and the outcome is uncertain, whereas at the very least I can spend half of that influence and I know I've got a system to show for it, it's kind of hard to blame anyone for saying that I just don't find this thing worth engaging with. But there's definitely some ways that you can sort of unpack some of it. If you play on a huge map, most resolutions get proposed, and if something has a lot of support, it goes to the top of the list. Yeah. Warhammer. The Demi? Sorry, my monitor is my chat monitor is a little bit further away, and I think I've probably got allergies because I've been rubbing my eyes a lot, so things are a little fuzzy. But no, he makes a really good point here. So in terms of stuff eventually coming up, there are going to be some resolutions which don't necessarily show. So obviously changing the council size is not going to be happening anytime soon. I think it would be very unlikely for us to see. Actually, I guess Unchained Knowledge is on its way up, but some of the sanctions for environment and technology, those are generally less likely to happen in this particular playthrough, just because of the species that are in there. Obviously, a large map, if you have lots of species, you're going to see more come up. But he's absolutely right. Like, you can sort of piggyback a lot on the existing work, and this is what we were talking about in terms of the diplomatic power here. That if you manipulate things in such a way that your diplomatic power goes up, your support for an existing measure, assuming that you don't want to spend the influence yourself, will make it a higher priority. Whereas if you, like, this is the funny thing, is it's self-reinforcing, right? If you haven't engaged with politics, you're probably less likely to be influential, and as a result, you're probably going to find it less useful to go through. Emmy, okay, thanks. Yeah, I'm definitely not saying it's impossible. I just, like, I'm really speaking specifically to the dynamics of this particular game, which had a relatively small number of species.
Species tampered with. May the spirits forgive us.
And in this case, you know, I'm kind of, that's really interesting that my AI is judging me. My read of the situation here is that I'm probably going to have to force through a few of those different ones. Okay, so we've done our modification. We got the minor military sanctions. Again, I'm not debauchery now. Thank you very much for the my apologies. Tater Gator, thank you for gifting the sub, and debauchery now, please do enjoy. Do please enjoy. I know some of you are doing this just for support, but there are some emotes for the channel as well, which I think the artist I got, known as the Highness of Sin, did a wonderful job on them. So feel free to continue using those. But yeah, so to Demi's point, like, we're probably more likely to see the things further than Tithe of the Soulless, because we eventually just converted all the species to spiritualism. It's only the factions that came out of the fragmenting of the Horde that aren't spiritualist.
Construction complete.
It would be very weird for us to see, a strong shift towards materialism all of a sudden. But I will also say this is a pretty unique playthrough. I'm not entirely sure I should be considering. I probably shouldn't consider this like a representative example by any stretch of the imagination. Okay. I've never really been able to make my peace with the fleet manager. Let's get those 4 corvettes, and now we can start working on. Well, we'll work on this improvement first. Oh god, I've got 2 battleships on queue? This is going to take forever. Request for technology. After seeing the advanced weapons that our security forces are equipped with, several generals from the subterranean alien empire of Uskomia Prime have come forward requesting that we share some of our military technology. Our own officers are hesitant to do this, as it would make the aliens more difficult to defeat in battle should it ever come to that. If we refuse the request, however, the aliens are certain to view it as an insult. So, arming savages with modern weapons would be a bad idea, or they are our friends, share what we can. I mean, we have got the army in place, just, you know what, we can probably land them too. The one bit of good news is that we don't really have a lot of engineering. Let's do... We'll improve relations for a little bit. Okay, another thing that can cost me influence. Now, I'd like to do some expansion, but it has, well... I think I'm actually going to wait on that. So we've got superfluid materials, and we've not yet done a religious revelation. Demi, this is definitely not my first game. I have in fact been playing this game since before it was released, and I've tried to let it slide, but maybe can we just pull back a little bit on, like, I think it's fine to have opinions, but this is ultimately my playthrough, and I really don't respond very well to being told what to do. So if we can maybe roll back a little bit on that. I can respect that there's a bunch of people who kind of like enjoying this game as just purely a conquest game and as a series of numbers that need to be, that need to go up or go on. It's just, it's not really how I play it. Like I'm sort of past the point of just wanting to do that sort of stuff. Sometimes I just like doing decisions because they seem interesting or appropriate. Yeah, no, I totally appreciate it. Here's the thing too. It is actually, I think it's really good for games to have a community that's willing to help, particularly for very complicated games, because people who really enjoy, people who want to get into Stellaris but don't have the ability to quite parse out all the menus and such, they're... for those of you that don't know, by the way, the wiki for the game is built inside of the browser. Sorry, there's a browser inside the game which will give you direct access to the wiki. So like everything that I've talked about here, I can actually go and get the specific notes. I believe the way it generally works is that Paradox sort of seeds the wiki when the game is released, and then it's sort of community maintained. I actually think the tutorial's a little bit better than the beginner's guide personally. But you can get in pretty deep inside of it. So like, just as an example, like let's say we had the galactic community, and instead of kind of going through the galactic community and having to sort of mouse over to see what each resolution did, obviously you kind of have to contend with a bit of Paradox advertising, but that's life. Like you can sort of see what all the different, you can sort of see what all of these different resolutions will do in terms of the effects that they have. This will sort of be laid out to you in a little bit more of a straightforward setup. Now, it's a trade-off a little bit, in my opinion. It will also sort of tell you when it says AI voting weights. So this is stuff you can't find within the game because this is a little bit more about what's happening in the background. So I don't always consult the wiki just because sometimes it's fun to see what comes up. Every once in a while, I'll see a story event that I haven't personally seen. And so it's sometimes fun to get caught by something unexpected. A great example would be that there's a planet which can turn very vicious very quickly. And I didn't know at the time. So I had to deal with a sudden like small crisis, which is fun to react to in certain cases. But obviously if somebody is struggling with the game, it's not fun to run into that sort of stuff. So it's nice to have people who are able to help it. I just always sort of see it as an opt-in sort of a situation. Yeah, you mean in terms of like you're not talking about the time before there were like borders, right? Before Apocalypse? Here's an example of me actually. So we have the potential for the custodian. So maybe this is not a bad example. I know I've sort of rolled the pace of the gameplay back a little bit, but I like this because obviously I was given a key for Nemesis. And because it's been taking us a while to get into the things, it's not a bad opportunity for us to talk a little bit about some of the things that Nemesis added. So this 300 influence. So this is here's the question. I'm going to attack the question that Tatergator asked in a slightly different way, which is, when would I ever want to participate in the galactic community, or why would I find the cost? And here's one way that I would think about that kind of a question. I've got 300 influence cost for the galactic custodian, and the description doesn't actually really help me in terms of what I would get. So let's bring that up just for the sake of the example. And so this is an example where I actually don't know. I know a little bit about the custodian from like the advertising and that, but I really haven't considered the custodian because I didn't really. It wasn't something that I was all that worried about until now, when I'm like, okay, actually this might be something that I want to work towards, particularly with the Grey Tempest. So under Galactic Reforms, here's what the game will tell you, right? We know there's strong support for it. I believe it would be unanimous unanimous support for the Black Codex becoming the custodian. All that the game tells me about this is when decisive action is needed, a member of the council can be elevated to the position of Galactic Custodian. The custodian is granted special powers and can propose new and powerful resolutions. So, like, if you read that and you learn that it's going to cost you 300 influence, like, why would you push that button, right? A free game that would come with... No. Are you talking about a pre-release version? Because the one I had I always thought looked really good. Anyways, like, just that description on its own is not really going to give you an idea about why you'd want to give up so much. And again, like, it's sometimes fun to do, to do the role-playing thing, but you don't want to, like, actively sabotage yourself because, I mean, let's just take a look at the pay. 6 influence is not exactly a slow rate, a slow gain in terms of 6 is not a slow rate to gain influence at. And even then, I'm looking at 60 months. That's about the time that I have for one of the Shroud events. So what you can do is you can go into the wiki if you've never run into something before. It'll actually describe it to you. So again, you need to have the Nemesis DLC, and of course, let us acknowledge the fact that Paradox has given me that key as well as keys to pretty much everything else that I'm running here, except for humanoids and plantoids. I'm sorry, but I know there's some new names in the chat, so it's good to get those disclosures out of the way. Here is how we can... So we've got the cost. Now what's the benefit? Well, number one, 5 monthly influence. So it's like, okay, so in terms of getting that back, we can think of that a little bit differently. So if nothing else were to change, and we wanted to sort of have some sort of a recoupment, after a little over 2 years, I think, we'd be getting our custodian influence back. That's not a great argument because obviously the stuff that's not respecting the time value of the influence. Obviously, sector you can claim today is going to get, system you can claim today is going to get you the resources, but you get the idea, right? Plus 30% diplomatic weight. So, again, as it says here, replaces the council bonus. Particularly if you're trying to sort of throw your weight around, so to speak, in the council, this might be something that pushes you over the edge rather than some of your other alternatives. Now, emergency measure cooldown can be really helpful. In fact, one way that you might be able to work around this, if I recall correctly, if you declare a crisis, I think you're not able to go to war. I think was something that we had discussed in a previous session. That might actually become relevant reasonably soon. But this might be another way that you're able to sort of stop an event from happening. So for instance, right now, right? Oops, I went the wrong way. I'll find the entry a little bit later. Like we've sort of been trying to box in the Vitresis Hive because we know that they're going to rip apart the Zaxoid Stellar Confederation, and I don't want the Vitresis Hive to be strong. And the Zaxoids are the most likely ally if I want to try and vassalize the Gearoids and try and take on the Vitresis Hive. So while the Zaxoids I sort of consider a rival, it's at a point here where it would be kind of nice to have. It would be nice to sort of make sure that this empire doesn't completely collapse in the face of the Vitresis, because then the Vitresis are either going to point towards me, or at the very least they're going to be able to defend against me. So open borders from every member of the galactic community. So let's pretend for a second here that the Vitresis Hive is, let's think about why the Vitresis Hive might want to do this. Well, right now they have a war that they can win relatively easily against the Zaxoid Stellar Confederation. The Vitresis are not really anywhere near Zaxoid territory. This war is probably going to be over by the time the Vitresis show up. So 300 influence is a lot to pay, but if you think you can get some good territorial gains, yeah, it's probably not a bad idea to consider doing something that forces people to give you access. Let's see what else it says here. Can entity session after half its time has passed the cost of 200 influence. I think they're talking about so basically, I guess you're kind of like declaring closure on emotion. That would be a neat one, actually. So, because we've definitely had a couple of resolutions that were going our way, and then it seems that there were some kind of backroom deals that sort of happened to make people shift to the oppose, and it wound up getting lost. Actually, we can change galactic focus without requiring a resolution at the cost of 100 influence. I mean, that on its own is probably worth considering. So, hey, guys, the Great Tempest is upon us. Please stop focusing on the galactic market. And then can freeze any resolution prevented it from being voted on. The Empire with the frozen resolution can still withdraw it to propose another one. So again, that's another opportunity where perhaps you're outvoted. You've got another way that you can sort of mess around with the order. Initially, an empire stays custodian for 30 years and afterwards returns to the Galactic Council. Custodians can propose the following unique resolutions for 200 influence. So again, this is why I was a little reluctant to talk about returning the value from becoming the custodian, because they were mentioning passing additional resolutions. Chances are you're really going to want to leave your mark on the galaxy. So extend custodianship plus 30-year term. Remove the custodianship term limit. And end custodianship. Galactic mobilization, so a huge bonus to naval capacity at the cost of trade value. Introduce galactic standards, so in this case it would be additional influence at a fairly steep energy cost. I mean, so it doesn't seem like a whole lot on its own, but given the fact that I am producing, what is it? Am I only producing 170? No, I'm producing 2,000. So, yeah, I don't know. Like, would you want to spend, I guess, like 40 energy credits a month to be able to get extra influence? Seems kind of expensive. Anti-piracy, United Front. So these are, again, they cost energy, but they are going to give you some certain bonuses. Being able to do damage to endgame crisis factions is probably a must. Proclaim the Galactic Imperium. The Galactic community becomes the Galactic Imperium, and obviously that is after you've removed the custodianship term limit. Maybe this is the time for the Black Codex to flex its diplomatic muscles. But yeah, I probably shouldn't spend too much time on this, but like, Galactic Defense Force, so I think this is probably not unlike when you're in a Federation. So Custodian can design and build upkeep free ships for the Galactic Defense Force. Oh, no, that is a different thing. So this seems to be something that the Custodian controls. It's like it's basically like a second navy that they get. GDF expansion. My God, this is a really good... This is wild. Okay, I gotta read about the Galactic Imperium now, because... yeah, but it doesn't seem like the Federation fleet, it like ownership passes. It seems like it's a... basically, you get to keep that, which I think is super cool. If the Proclaim the Galactic Imperium resolution is passed, the Galactic community will be reformed into the Galactic Imperium. All Galactic Imperium members will leave any federation they're part of. The Custodian will become the Galactic Emperor, with a new name depending on the previous authority. Shift ethics towards fanatic authoritarian, shift government to imperial, and gain the Galactic Sovereign Civic, and gain the ability to upgrade the planetary capital of the Empire capital into the Imperial Palace. If the Galactic Emperor previously had the corporate authority, it will shift government as well, but become able to use both regular and corporate civics. Oh god. I'm going to wind up playing another Megacorp again. All Custodian perks will remain, and in addition, the Galactic Emperor cannot be attacked by Galactic Imperium members. Empires cannot leave the Galactic Imperium. The Galactic Imperium... I think there's a bug that makes the GDF fleet stay around after the Imperium is declared and grow infinitely. That's the bonus of having an empire, I guess. All right, the Galactic Imperium keeps track of a value called Imperial Authority. If Imperial Authority is at least 100, all members of the Galactic Imperium will join the Galactic Emperor in all defensive wars. If it falls below 50, members can use the Spark Rebellion espionage operation. Envoys can be assigned to the Galactic Imperium to raise or lower Imperial Authority by 0.1 per month each. When the Galactic Imperium is formed, the Galactic Council will be reformed into the Imperial Council. Galactic Reform resolutions will be replaced by Imperial Council ones, which can only be proposed by the Galactic Emperor. If the Galactic Defense Force resolution has been passed, it will be replaced by the Imperial Armada resolution. In addition, the Galactic Trade Organization resolution will be moved to the Imperial Institutions Group, a united front to foreign relations. Oh god, this sounds very fun. And of course, abolishing the Imperial Council is the ultimate goal. So I don't think I'm quite ready to make my move to try and become the galactic custodian. But can you become the Emperor as a machine empire? That's a good question. I don't see. There's nothing in that description that tells me you can't. I'm assuming the question here is like the Gestalt consciousness, so would the Vitresis Hive be able to become the Emperor? That's a good question, because I don't know what an Imperial Authority really looks like as a hive mind, but... Anyways, but yeah, so like this is a great example. Let's just remember specifically why we did... Oh my god, no virtue. You've got so many people here. All right. Hello, everybody. We're actually just talking about the... council stuff. So... Let me just take a quick second here and tell you all about No Virtue, and let me give you an apology, because I think a lot of you are really used to a certain quality of gameplay from No Virtue, and I provide the exact opposite. So first of all, I think a lot of you, let me just take a quick second here and say, a lot of you here are very big Stellaris fans, and if you have not checked out No Virtue, they're an excellent streamer for that game. Definitely play it at a very high level. I would say, I do not mean this in anything but the most positive terms. Almost like the opposite of how I approach the game. So like for me, this is kind of like a very strategy heavy visual novel almost, where I've got my sort of like my species story, and I tend to make decisions that are specifically oriented towards the species that I'm playing. No Virtue will pretty much crank up the difficulty level and then proceed to just bend the game to her will. And so it's absolutely wonderful. Yeah, I did see that you were playing Airport CEO today, so I wanted to at least warm them up with the Stellaris side. But on top of that, actually, it's actually one series that I've really enjoyed watching No Virtue play is Cook Serve Delicious, which I realize has also been a while. But Surviving Mars is another one. I get the impression that you prefer Surviving Mars to Surviving the Aftermath. But one way or the other, I know No Virtue is definitely very good at the Paradox games and sort of Paradox adjacent games. I know she's been on the streamer battles. And so if you like watching these kinds of games, and particularly I have the defect of the fact that I talk a lot and I tend to play the game a little bit more sort of RPG-ish. If you are really looking for that skill, or if you're looking for somebody who's really good at digging into games and sort of working out sort of the best way to, kind of bend the game and sort of see how far you can get away with it. No Virtue is an excellent broadcaster for that, and somebody who's definitely, it's been a delight to just sort of see their channel kind of grow by leaps and bounds. So in any case, sorry to kind of drag things down to a halt, but it's always a pleasure to see No Virtue. I've had fewer opportunities to kind of catch streams just because of work stuff, but I do enjoy sort of popping by every once in a while. I actually also owe a thank you to No Virtue for recommending the game Pandora First Contact, which is a Slytherin published sort of 4X game. It was her alternative to Civilization Beyond Earth. Now, I'm actually quite fond of Civilization Beyond Earth. But it was really interesting to be able to check out Pandora First Contact, because it's by Proxy Studios, who would later go on to make Gladius Relics of War, which is currently available in a Humble Bundle. And again, definitely not a bad 4X. Very different from the direction that Civilization went. But overall, just a really talented streamer, and somebody who I think has got some great game recommendations as well. All right. And also, let me just take a quick second here for those of you who I didn't say hi to before, but we had No Virtue with the host and Bamboozle Ballet. That's a great name, by the way. And Eric Satan, you followed a little bit earlier. But yeah, anyways, hopefully all of you will enjoy this slight change of pace. I will try at my very least to get some gameplay in. But this has been a very weird run for me. We sort of started abandoned in the corner of the galaxy, and the game has kept throwing a bunch of events at us. So we've been trying to sort of build up our military and have an excuse to go and sort of hit the bad guys. And then they keep throwing crises at us to give us a reason to stay home. So, for instance, just after the Great Khan fell, we've got a couple of weak Khanates that popped out. The Great Tempest is kind of pouring out of the Grindor black hole. But we're not really near an L-gate. So I've sort of been spoiling for a fight against the Vitresis, who are a little bit stronger than me. But I've also been sort of sitting in my borders and building things up, waiting to get an idea in terms of how bad things are actually gonna get. That's what I'm trying to do here with my science ship. Maybe just get a peek in terms of where we're at in terms of the invasion. If nothing else, maybe to just try and find where the other L gates are. We've also got tradition, so there's only one more for me to do, which is diplomacy, and I believe it's secure shipping that I want to move towards eventually. It'd be really cool to form a federation for sure. And the extra envoys would be nice, because I've definitely been trying to build out my spy network. But in this case here, I think secure shipping is where I want to go, just because I haven't been tending my trading lanes all that well, and I've been holding back on some star bases to get the exact line of what my trade corridors look like. Once made a driven... Isn't that the only L-gate in the game? It's the only one I've been able to find, but there's also parts of the galaxy I haven't explored yet, so it'd be a little weird if there was... Can you even have an L gate? The L cluster with only one gate? That would be really weird. Anyways, I'll do open markets just so that we can get secure shipping. Federations are cool and all, but maybe attaching myself to something at war with the most powerful species isn't the done thing. Oh. I have a little spider that decides to come down and start building a web near me. At around this hour, so my little companion has decided to see what's happening in the galaxy right now. Right, and we're still working on these. Oh yeah, sorry, I've been delaying on this Intham decision for a while. So there's a couple things that I can do with Intham. Intham is sort of maxed out in terms of its capacity as far as basic work is concerned. We've got all the generator districts we're going to build. We can't build any more city districts. We don't have the ability to embiggen the planet. So if I want to have straight up workers, what I need to start doing is building specialist districts to allow that kind of employment. Now, there is one thing which I want to start building on more of my planets, which are the strongholds. I've been underinvesting in strongholds, and of course soldiers will improve naval capacity. We're actually finally getting close to the naval capacity. So that is one consideration that I have. But that's also sort of kicking the can down the road. The real question here is, do I think there's any value in trying to absorb these basic workers into something such as... a slave processing facility probably wouldn't be bad for this planet just because of all the enslaved pops. Or do I finally say, you know what, we've got other needs. There's some other place where this can be, and we pay the energy credits to resettle them. 10,000? That's ridiculous. I actually don't remember. I don't normally build the slave processing facility, so Unemployed slaves on this planet are subject to automatic resettlement to other colonies. That actually, yeah, so I think that alone makes it worthwhile here. So, problem solved. The other thing that I can do, back in the old version, before they changed the way that that this stuff worked, I would tend to wind up building a lot of malls, so commercial zones. In this case, you get, it used to be 5, so now you get 3 clerk jobs. Clerks produce the amenities and the trade value, and especially because I was playing a lot of megacorps, you know, I was kind of already getting some gains from trade, so it's not that, it's like, it wasn't that big of a burden. The thing is here that I've got some pretty clear specialization for my planets here, and it's really hard for me to see how making commercial centers out of my remaining few, my remaining few slots would really help me out there. Okay, so as usual, we do our shake and bake colonies. Actually, because we've got some raiders here, or at least what's left of them. Thank you for sticking around, by the way. Does anybody know where the term shake and bake colony comes from? There's a movie that it's a throwaway line. It's kind of like when I ask people about the quote from the, oh God, where's this? I always keep forgetting. No, it's not Situation Log. Society Management. The off-world companies. Jimmy Dolan Shake and Bake. I have no idea which one that is, Illusory Thal. I should take a look at it. It's a science fiction movie is the one I'm thinking of. Okay, I don't want to make... I know this is like a second digression. This will be a short one, though. So, because this one, somebody correctly got on YouTube, actually. But we've got a new life. A new life awaits our citizens in the off-world colonies. A chance to begin again in a golden land of opportunity and adventure. The second part is not actually from the movie, but that is actually from Blade Runner. It's what the sort of blimp in the background is saying. And again, like, it's not significant. I think in an earlier version, like the one that had the Harrison Ford voiceover, he expressed some skepticism over the fact that if the colonies were so good, they wouldn't need to advertise them that much, which is pretty much the Industries of Titan sort of claim. Oh, actually, No Virtue. If you've not checked it out, and you're still around, because like obviously you've just done your stream. I don't know if you've checked it out yet, but I have had a lot of fun with Industries of Titan. It is in early access, so there are definitely a lot of things that you may sort of kind of grind up against. But I will also say the developers have been really active and really quick at implementing stuff. And I know you I also know you kind of like working on stuff that maybe has that level of interactivity. So if you've not checked it out, that is one that might be on your radar. I have a lot of primes because I think I've been colonizing. Like I've just been sending out the colony ships while paused. Okay, Shake and Bake Colony is what Burke, who is the corporation representative in Aliens, the sequel to Alien, the colony on, I think it's LV-426, is referred to as a Shake and Bake colony. They set it up to terraform for a certain number of years. I would never want to belong to any... Hempage, thank you very much for the follow. All right, so we've got our mining station output. The special probes are equipped with swarms of nanites that identify previously unknown mineral concentrations and mark them for later extraction. Are you talking... Oh, right. So the idea that it's a toxic atmosphere, but the game is still worried about pollution. Is that the idea? So I might do cruiser build speed because I am going to need to build a lot of them soon. I do like to go for the higher level ones. Barrow Dice. That's a great name. Thank you for the follow as well. Thank you, all of you. Again, I know I'm a very different type of broadcaster than No Virtue. I just take a really long time to get anything done. But I know it is something that tends to work for people. At least my little group of people. If anything, hopefully I'm just like a gateway drug for Stellaris, and then you can go watch the pros like No Virtue. I don't really need alloy nanoplants, but it does get me another kick of the can. So here's how I tend to do tech. So sometimes I'll pick a tech just because it gets me a kick at the can, particularly because my sprawl is so high. Being able to like be really selective about my my tech is helpful. But I am also preparing for a fight, and we definitely need to get my fleets ready to sort of punch the Vitrese's hive. So getting stuff like Marauder missiles is tempting. Also, something like standardized battleship patterns to make it so that I can build battleships faster is also good, but it's 48 months compared to 24. I think in this case I'm going to go for the cruiser build speed because it sort of splits the difference. I don't need the extra alloy plants, and it still gives me faster construction, but I don't feel good about it. If you could have one power IRL that could be considered terraforming, what power would you have? Well, isn't terraforming the power? I may misunderstand the question. Totally here for Stellaris. Excellent. Thank you, Hempage. For those, also for those of you wondering how much I commit to this stuff, dedicated Stellaris Mondays for the foreseeable future for sure. I am actually I'm really quite strained in terms of the games that I'm playing. So usually Wednesday I'll play one of the Brace Yourself games, either Industries of Titan or Phantom Brigade. And although this Wednesday I am attending a local game developer meetup, I don't develop games, I just stream them. But I do get to find some cool local stuff like Radio Viscera, and also Spring Falls, and there's actually some people who worked on Cuphead in that group as well. And then on Friday we were just finishing Cloudpunk. But that is now open, and I'm going to be looking for a new game. And then it's my birthday Thursday, so I'll do a special stream for that, because I'm definitely not going to be able to go to the movies.
We are spreading our
Did you play Masters of Orion at all? I didn't play the original one. GOG did give me a key for the remake that they did, but I didn't put a significant amount of time into it, and I tend to notice that people are usually not referring to the remake when they're talking about that game. But from what I understand, Masters of Orion 2 at least had a very significant influence on sort of Stellaris and all of the other games that sort of came afterwards. MC says, here's an example of my power would be ground flattening. You think that would be cool, but temperature regulation, water creation, seismic regulation, all terraforming. Man, water creation would be extremely useful. That's the problem with questions like that. I tend to go for like the practical. Oh yeah, actually, does anybody want to know the I was talking a little bit about role playing. I can also give you all the origin story of this species if you'd like, but I don't want to do another digression without a little bit of gameplay here. All right, so we're going to take advantage of the shroud when we can. The shroud pulsates with power. It feels like home. This, by the way, is the furthest I've gone in the shroud. All right, the void here shimmers with power. Let us rest a while. So if I want another psionic avatar, it's low probability of success, which I think is equivalent to saying a high probability of getting a debuff. So you can get a, I'm assuming, temporary boost of shield strength. And then army morale, which unless something bad happens with my burrowing friends, will probably not be something that I need. So I feel like a little bit of an idiot doing this, but I'm going to roll the dice. So if successful, the energies of the shroud will be channeled into a powerful boon that has a positive effect on the entire empire. Psionic power required to summon an avatar and bring it into our universe is simply beyond our current ability to channel. The psychic energies of the shroud fizzle with agitation as our attempt fails. Alright, well, that's fair enough. Now, you played Masters of Orion 2 when you were younger, and yeah, Stellaris is more like a modern successor to the series. Yeah, I think that was one thing that I heard a lot about the modern version, which was it seemed to be taking... Now, I don't know if this is true or not, but I heard from a few people that said it seemed to take more of a page out of the Endless games, like Endless Space, than it did the Master of Orion series. And again, like it's easy for me to say, right? Because I've never played any of them. Well, I played the modern one, but Master of Orion 2 is one that I would really like to try, simply because I know of the influence that it has had on later games that I very much enjoyed. There's actually a couple of other examples of games like that. So, for instance, Master of Magic, which is, I believe, recently acquired by Slitherine, is another example of that. And I seem to recall some... oh, hang on. I'm probably buying minerals like an idiot. But yeah, like I think there was like a fan mod that, or a mod that was sort of turned into a proper upgrade for the game. So I might actually already have Masters of Orion in my library, but it's kind of like every classic game. Like I do enjoy older games, but I definitely have to be in the mood for it. The fact of the matter is that we've inherited a lot of really smart design wisdom. And I do actually kind of take it for granted now that most games can be played without a manual. And that's a very different way of playing. Like, I love the game Alpha Centauri. It's one of Firaxis's earlier games. I think Sid Meier's Gettysburg was the first one. But I think the second one was Alpha Centauri. That is a wonderful game. I still think that's a wonderful game. But obviously, if you're coming to that from Civ 6, that's going to be a very different experience, and probably reading the manual would be a good idea. So I think definitely, I'd like to try Masters of Orion too, but it's definitely one of those ones where I have to be in the mood. And I was talking a little bit about how I want to try Shadow Empire. And Shadow Empire is another one where they sort of expect you to read the manual and sort of deal with a somewhat opaque UI. So these heavy energy weapons are fire-focused particle beams that cause massive damage. The size of the emitter arrays limits their use to battleships and titans. By the way, I'm sorry if I didn't properly answer your question, MC, but it's really hard for me not to say that generating water... I would probably say water creation would be the first one I would consider now that I see that on the list. Temperature regulation is actually another one that I would think would be very useful. If nothing else, I just don't like being cold. Oh, okay, so now I've got a bunch of really good weapon options here. So the one I'm definitely not picking is the shield harmonics. It's really expensive and it just gives me a percent shield bonus. I suppose the phase disruptor would make the most sense in terms of my overall structure. So the idea here is that this is a small and it's going to only be attached to smalls and mediums, but it's really good for the shield and armor penetration. And what that will mean is that will complement the capital ships, which will just basically go in and do stuff that obliterates hulls. Now, I have kind of let the AI design my ships, but I think that's going to be the first one that I work towards. I mean, obviously I want it all, but I don't think that was the worst out of the picks. The rust? What rust? Oh, that rust. Just scrape it off. Scrape, scrape, scrape. It's as good as new. Ooh, we've got a pretty good stock of Zro, I think. 12k? Yeah, I think we can give some up. Look, this ally, the weight, the luster, the glow. Have you ever seen such metallic bonding? Incredible yield strength, maximum grade, nominal impurities. We can feel it. It calls to you. All right, so if I think I already finished my citadels, but let's maybe...
Construction complete.
We'll double check that. I should also kind of do a proper round of upgrades. Problem is I have too many competing priorities. Okay. So before I go too much further, let's just go back to our... Okay, so we're already building one battleship. So I think we needed 4 cruisers. Four cruisers and 12 corvettes. Well, 2's a start. Is Ro addictive? Good question. I don't know. Maybe somebody in chat who's played more Spiritualist Empires really knows that. Snorting the remains
Our
of
ships
a
have
dead
been
species
improved.
is quite the pastime. Okay, always happy for the upgrades, although we're probably ready for another batch of improvements. Are we in position yet? Yes, it looks like we are. Okay, so this is a temporary solution, but we've got sort of one of my main trade columns is just simply too valuable now. So as a temporary measure, we'll get these ships on patrol. We'll send them out to Jinkath. The easiest ways for me to deal with the sort of the piracy problems is just to actually finally get these bases built.
Construction complete.
But one of the main reasons why I haven't done that yet is I haven't quite settled on where all the colonies are going. Oh, that's really shameful. Okay. I gotta be very careful with what's gonna happen here. And I'm gonna accumulate a little more influence over time.
We are spreading our faith to a new world.
Actually, that's a lie. I want to at least build star bases on the remaining... I want to claim the remaining planets so I can terraform them. And again, I've got a huge... So this is like an 80 consumer goods deficit. This is mostly because I've sort of supercharged the research on Wentwork. And at some point, I'm going to need to make some administrative planets as well. And that's going to have its consumer goods cost. The good news is that we've got a couple of industrial planets which we're going to be building. All right, abandoned gateway. We have encountered another abandoned gateway, this time near the Grindor Black Hole. It appears to have been built entirely by microscopic nanites of an unknown design. Unlike the previous structure, this gateway has been significantly altered since its initial construction. Its connection to the rest of the network has been severed. Instead, the only valid destination is an uncharted group of stars just beyond our galaxy that has been designated the L Cluster by our astronomers. Although the gateway emits a faint power signature, it has been deliberately locked into some kind of maintenance loop that prevents its activation. Until we find some way of aborting this process, the L Cluster will remain beyond our reach.
Situation log
Interesting.
updated.
So what? I just thought
Our
these
science
things...
ship is beset by enemies.
I guess I've been the one to open the L Cluster each time. I always thought that this was... something that we could... just as soon as the crisis starts, the L gates open. Huh. Okay, well, I'm apparently trying to escape. I don't actually see where the bad guys are, though. Oh, wait a minute. No, I know what happened here. We found the Tempest shoals. So, they ran. That's fine. I wanted a little bit of an idea of what we were up against. Now, what I didn't notice, though, was this enigmatic ascension. The alien entity Baldor the 43rd claims that it can uplift our people using hypnopedia, sleep learning. Our researchers will have to monitor the process closely. I feel like this was a deal with the devil we were going to make at some point. You know what? Let's embrace the madness. Well, I kind of got what I deserved. But this is some pretty valuable intel, so now that we know that the Tempest Shoal is 34k strength, we can sort of think a little bit about our own fleets. So for instance, if the Vernalis Star Fleet is 38k, I need to be prepared for some pretty brutal fights.
We are spreading our faith to a new world.
I'm going to do a slightly different approach now. So we've got an industrial world which doesn't have artisans on it. Oh, wait. It was Iblira, right? Yeah. So I'm going to start, instead of focusing on boosting the tech acquisition at Wentwork, I'm going to start sending people to Iblira to boost my my acquisition of consumer goods.
Our ships have been improved. Our ships have been improved. Our ships have been improved.
So a couple of things that I can
System
do
survey complete.
in the meantime.
Complete.
I do want to make sure that I've at least got my fleets to full capacity, because I've been neglecting them for too long.
Our ships have been improved.
Once all that's said and done, and I start getting the the remaining star bases down,
have been improved.
then I can start working on some anchorages. One thing I can do in the meantime... Oh, Carabineers thieves! After a recent visit by the Racket Industrial Fleet to Sayu Prime, it has been noticed that a number of resources are missing from the Central Reserve. It is suspected that the Racket Industrial Fleet has somehow made off with them. My precious. Alright.
Anomaly found.
Alright. Unemployed slaves on this planet are subject to automatic resettlement to other colonies. So, why aren't you getting resettled? I just want to find one of my generator worlds, so let's stick them on Moscot Prime. I figure extra energy credits are not a terrible before I do, there's another audit of the worlds that I want to do, but I also want to see if I've got any more double primes. Blira Prime. Okay, no, that's fine. Alright. Which is the bigger one? Size 16, size 21. Alright.
System survey complete.
Anomaly. This toxic and lifeless world appears to have been once inhabited by a moderately advanced pre-space civilization. The ruins of their cities are still strewn across the surface. So research for that. Let's just make sure that we haven't run out of things to get our spaceships to do. Okay, we're fine for now. I'm going to hold off on the relic just because I might want to make my political move. Apparently the psionic avatar is moving forever.
We are spreading our faith to a new world.
A surprise catch. Our spy master, watching over the Zaxoid Stellar Confederation, reports the surprise successful acquisition of a new asset, a sympathetic contact who will be of service to our operations as and when we need them. All efforts have been taken to ensure that this new contact is genuine. Protocols have been established which seek to minimize the risk of potential double agents, for example. Well, that's welcome. The Geroid Empire has ended the trade treaty. All right, so that's a shame because we did want a nice big stack of alloys. Perhaps what I can do, though, is minimize my consumer goods expenses. So right now we are importing 75. So the Geroid, technically we're at war with them right now, but I'd still like to... oh, wow, they're doing a great job. Zaxoids are doing a great job of beating up the Geroids. Again, I don't necessarily want the Zaxoids to completely win this, but given that the Gearoids are allied with the Vitresis Hive, I guess the thing is that in the worst case scenario, if the Zaxoid completely incorporates the Gearoid Empire, then that just gives me as much of an excuse as anything to take them over, either through Federation or through just straight up conquest. But anyways, excuse me. So sorry, I'm gonna do. This is not the best way of handling this, but it's not like it. Again, I'm totally okay with heuristics in this case. So we would spend 263 per consumer good. Obviously, that's going to change. You know, that's going to change over time. But you've determined that Zro is an addictive substance, addicted to winning. But anyway, so it's going to cost me about 263 to pick up a consumer goods, sorry, a single unit of consumer goods, and then in order to make that in terms of mineral sales, I'm at a rate of 0.7, which again is going to go down the more I sell, but I'm looking at basically about 3.75 3.75 minerals per consumer good. So if I can get a trade with another species, which is better than 3.75, it makes sense for me to do that exchange. So first thing I want to do, and actually I've learned, so there's a little bit of a drawback to doing it this way, but if you can make it so that, like, you're, Freshly, thank you very much for the follow. So I tend to do these super long, deals, and actually one of the things that I wind up doing, which can be frustrating in some circumstances, but also really beneficial in others, is, so I'm almost taking them for everything that they're worth, right? I can probably, nope, even 81 will take them to a negative 1,000. So what happened last time was I actually had to buy some minerals because I traded away more minerals than I actually had on hand. Now, admittedly, I was buying relatively cheap minerals, like I've been selling them forever, but still, it's not great if I'm trading out more than 1,000 in terms of minerals. So one of the things that I find is kind of nice is that if I go like right up to their limit, if I've committed myself to 30 years of a trade that maybe I regret, there's the chance that the deal gets broken because they're not able to meet the commitment. On the other hand, if you really want to rely on that trade, it can get a little bit frustrating to redo the contract. But anyways, in this case, we're going to do a 30-year contract. And what the simple idea here is, because we already worked out the number that we wanted, as long as I can do this for less than 300 minerals, it's better than if I just were to do the trade directly in the market. So as it turns out, we can't do this at a better rate, but maybe we can play with the numbers a little bit. Then again, they're also probably going to be a little bit less inclined to take this deal because we have been feeding them a bunch of oh, it's close. Yeah, it's just shy of where it needs to be, though. So let's try something a little more modest. Let's see if we can get them at 30. Yeah, like I said, the deal here is really to try and get, I guess, 38 is technically, rounding, it works a little bit better. This really isn't worth it for me at this rate. I do also have a big surplus of food, though, but let's, just before we go too much further, let's just see if we can make this work with someone else. Now, again, we were already doing this with alloys, so chances are these species are pretty flush with minerals at the moment. Again, I don't want to necessarily push them past a comfort zone. Also, I don't need 249, so let's maybe just stop the nonsense right there. I will say 100, though. That also makes the math considerably easier. So let's say 376 is my... Aha! And extending the contract length will probably help me out there too. So this is a perfect example, right? I don't need to go to the galactic market anymore. I'm giving up a resource that I've got, you know, a ton of. I don't see any reason not to approach this. So let's offer them the deal. We are reviewing your proposal. Now, I'm not inclined to doing a deal like this with the Vitresis Hive because they're a hive mind and they can definitely do something with the food. But in the meantime, let's see if we can cut a similar deal as far as alloys are concerned, keeping in mind that the last time we did this, I got very silly. So again, our rate for minerals is more or less the same. But in order to buy an alloy, it's pretty expensive, 6.59. So essentially, as far as the going rate is concerned, I would need to give up 9.4 in order to obtain alloys. And again, I was sort of relying on this nice big influx. So let's just see. I suspect this is going to be a harder trade deal to do just because there's a war going on, and so I think generally people want more alloys. That's probably why it's so expensive. But let's see what we can get away with. So I think this is already asking for trouble. Like, 900, give me a break. Like, okay. So I guess the question is, what am I willing to give up? Let's say my limit's 500. Does that still make sense? So that's about a rate of 7 minerals per alloy. I mean, I think we could probably build that better ourselves, but let's run with it. And then I think I'm actually going to try and offer a similar deal to the Gearoids. Okay, so first thing I got to do is go back to the market and stop spending too much for consumer goods. And in fact, one of the reasons I want to do this with alloys... Oh. Trade deal failed because the Zaxoids do not have the alloys to maintain it. Well, that's why the last one failed, so... I wish I remembered the numbers that I had before. But... Sorry, I just want to take a minute to work this out again. So that's 398 for 50, was it? Okay, so that's a slightly worse deal at 796, but it's still better than the market rate right now. It's actually not quite that important to me that I pull this trade off. The big one for me is that if I'm getting it from the Zaxoids, I also definitely want to make sure that the Gearoids are the ones who are also seeing a drop in their alloy production. This might be more than I can afford. Sorry, I wanted to use my phone as a calculator and then it turned off. Sorry, I know this has kind of drug everything to a halt, but what I'm trying to do here is set up a few decades worth of trades here. How do you do, Captain Zerge? Are you early enough tonight? Nope, done in half an hour. Yeah, no, I'm definitely not going to be logging off like the second that you appear on the stream. So. I am going to be, in the future, trying to keep... This is actually a better deal than I got with the Zaxoid, so... yeah, I'm going to try and be a little bit better at keeping my times, because I do need to record this week's YouTube video still. But for now, I think, I think at the very least doing my usual 3 hours, and also when there's certain people in chat, hasn't been a while since I've done a big cast for them, I do try and match things. I do try and deliver. All right, Crackdown. While it cannot be denied that the intoxicating effects of Asperia Prime's atmosphere are enjoyable and even helpful in some cases, there is pressure from the more conservative parts of the Black Codex to crack down on the possibly addictive gases. So, extra physics research for our trouble. But lower governing ethics attraction. So if we say shut it down, hallucinogen removal, or leave it as it is. This is a tricky one, actually. Also, it looks like I still have some slow breeders. Let's shut it down.
Situation log updated.
Man, they're really struggling on the alloys. Okay, we'll just leave it with the Gearoids for now. The alloys are a nice to have, but not necessary. All right, there is evidence that the current climate of Zetheri B3 is the cause of a runaway greenhouse effect triggered by massive amounts of pollution. The oceans have boiled away and the planet is permanently enclosed in a dense cloud layer due to its thick atmosphere. Scattered ruins from the indigenous civilization can still be found on the surface, suggesting an overpopulated culture that perished in the mid to late stages of an industrial age. Okay, Gearoids don't like this. Is an appalling trade deal, part of some sort of insane bargaining strategy. Sorry, is this appalling trade deal part of some insane bargaining strategy you've devised? Do not bother us with such nonsense again. Well, you liked it when I offered it to you. Alright, fossilized remains. Archaeologists have unearthed more and more fossilized remains in this valley, and the count is now up to 26 distinct sapient species, none of them native to Lyrum Prime. Those fossils that have been sufficiently preserved to determine a cause of death all point towards physical trauma inflicted by blades, spears, or arrows. Not a single specimen appears to have been felled by the equivalent of a modern projectile or energy weapon. The ruins of a small structure of some sort have been found near the entrance of the valley. It appears to originate from the same time period as the fossils. Perhaps it will shed some light on things. The original event for this was fossilized remains from several different species that do not appear to have been indigenous to Lyrium Prime have been found in a large and secluded valley on the planet. They all date from roughly the same time period, with a span of a few centuries. Within the span of a few centuries to some 3.6 million years ago. Each of these species seem to have evolved in its own unique biosphere, and all appear to have been sapient. Strangely, every fossilized individual found so far shows signs of having met a violent end. The Senate is now in session for the cooperative research channels, so this will boost diplomatic weight from tech. It will also improve research station output at the cost of higher starbase upkeep. Now, I believe I'm still a laggard when it comes to tech. So,
Special project complete.
The Tresis Hive has a base of 2010, and I have a base of 1435. The atmosphere of Isperia Prime has been cleansed of its intoxicating elements. So, not very good for a research planet anymore, but that's life. Okay, so they lied to me about the slaves. Better, they just got bought up too quickly. And we're now at our naval cap, so I should be probably a little more focused on these conversions. Now notice here, we've already got the stronghold down, so this is one thing I want to start doing for some of these other worlds. So for instance, it'd be nice to have some more expansion. Oh, actually, let's do this upgrade.
Construction complete.
Actually, until all of the administrator jobs are gobbled up, I think I'm going to keep a gene clinic here. Again, my shake and bake colony of a gene clinic. It's a little less important to us to have the gene clinics because we've largely overcome our slow upbringing. There's going to be a couple of worlds that are outliers, but they're not it's not tragic like it was before. I think I am going to I'm going to make a jump to Jomprin first. Although it does remind me that for species, I would like to apply my new
situation log updated.
So just 3 months. All these beautiful colonies. Okay, so first priority is going to be to anything with special resources needs to get picked up. I'm pausing the game just so that I can grab the slave, and I believe it was Iblira. Yeah, the industrial world. So again, I'm trying to make it so that I can buy up, that I can boost up my consumer goods capacity.
Construction complete.
So. A migrating forest reserve. I do not remember. I remember what the migrating forest is. Okay, that's just social research. Okay, well, that'll help the temple, but doesn't really give me a whole lot. Fuming bog we've already covered. Ooh, bubbling swamp and crystalline caverns. This is a pretty rich find. I've not really been taking advantage of a lot of my strategic resources for the time being. That will change, but you could never get into this game. Such an expansive game, you should really revisit it. I definitely think it's worth it, the Ruin 98. One thing, too, is depending on how... welcome, by the way. Depending on how recently you played it, it's also fair to say that the game is probably very different from the last time. If you played before the DLC Apocalypse, you will notice that the borders are completely different. Chances are you probably played after that. But the thing about it is, and we were talking about this a little bit earlier, the trade-off for the game is basically if you... there's not a... Like any game that you play, you always have lots of other options, and not necessarily
Species
every game is
tampered
going
with.
to be worth...
May the spirits forgive us.
Not necessarily every game is going to be worth spending that time with, right? Like, I particularly like first-person shooters. I don't really feel that I add anything by streaming them. But it would also be fair to say
Our ships
that
have been improved.
I probably have a little bit less interest in a game like Proteus, which seems to be sort of trying to capture a very sort of 2000s sort of style old school first person shooter versus something like, you know, Apex Legends or the new Wolfenstein games or whatever, which is probably more my taste. So the thing is that Stellaris asks a lot of you to get into it, but as is true for pretty much all of the Paradox games, the deal is that if you can get into it, and I think Stellaris, particularly with its tutorial, is probably the easiest to get into, but remember that's in relative terms. This is not an easy game to get into by any stretch of the imagination. But the trade-off basically is that if you're willing to put the time in on the game, it's also going to be one that sort of rewards you with hundreds of hours of play, because there's just always something new to find. And that's true for me too. Like, I did have a little bit of a break from it before Nemesis came out, but I'm really enjoying kind of getting reacquainted with the game for sure. You've always enjoyed Paradox's work, but Stellaris really stumped you. Oh, that's interesting. You played it last year in March or something. You have 8 hours of gameplay. You know, so the one that was really the breaking point for me, I started off in Crusader Kings 2, which I really enjoyed. And I really, really struggled with Europa Universalis, which I have since come to really enjoy. I think it's a wonderful game, and it's definitely one that I think has probably been the most rewarding in terms of me just discovering new approaches and just kind of the depths of that particular game. But that was definitely the one that I struggled with, because I was so used to sort of this military component being like, take big number, move it to the other, you know, smaller number, and automatically win. If you think of Europa Universalis that way, you can get into some trouble really quick. I gotta count 8. Okay, just 2 more. I could buy the resources, but there's no real need. But yeah, so I don't know, like Stellaris is definitely, for me, it's one that I've really enjoyed, because unlike the other Paradox games, which of course are all enjoyable, I think one of the things that really drives me to Stellaris and makes it stand out as a really unique game is that all of the other ones have sort of history as their setting and their backdrop. And as a consequence, you'll have these asymmetric starts, right? If you start as the city-state of Ulm, you know, the game is utterly indifferent as to whether or not you think it's fair that you have, you know, neighbors that can take you over. You know, historically, the Ottoman Empire was in a much better position than Ulm, let's say. Stellaris, of course, is a little bit like that first turn in Civilization, when you have your settler and you're moving out into, you know, into the map, and you're discovering what's there. And I think there is something very satisfying about playing that, and it's interesting to just sort of see how the game sort of turns out, how everything sort of shifts, where you get to play a grand strategy game where people might have a little bit more of an even start. Obviously, you've got the advanced start, so that's what happened with Vitrese's Hive, and we're next to a fallen empire. But it's really interesting, and it's very different for these grand strategy games, where you are going to be driven by sort of the circumstances of the map, which is going to be randomly generated. But you're not necessarily driven by the, you know, the circumstances of, say, you know, all of the wars that had been fought prior to the events of the game, right? So if you play England or France at the start of Europa Universalis 4, the conditions have been set up for you to have some kind of a conflict, or, you know, at the very least, like to have something that could potentially spark it. Whereas that's not at all guaranteed in Stellaris, and it's a very different way of playing, and in some ways a very sometimes a very rewarding one. CK2 is your start as well. You enjoyed the third. Most play is definitely Hearts of Iron 4. Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, I've not played the third. I have the Game Pass, so I can finally give it a try if I want. Hearts of Iron 4 I've actually still struggled a little bit to get into. It's just mostly because I like to have as you've probably noticed in terms of the playthrough, I really like having reasons for doing what I do. So like, I'll be honest with you, like if I were to like have a proper amount of time to like just sit down and talk about all of the dynamics in this window in terms of like why maybe just dividing it by my unit price for minerals isn't the best sort of comparison for figuring out like alloys or whatever, I'm sure I could probably come up with a much better way of figuring out what my proper trades should be. So for instance, I should be considering my own productive capacity within my empire, for instance. But obviously, like, there's a limit, right? But in general, I like having reasons for doing what I do. And I just tend to find, because Hearts of Iron is interesting because of its, so much of it is focused on production and your ability to get the war effort underway. I mean, I'm Canadian, right? So the Second World War was this tremendous shift into an industrial economy. And so that's a really interesting subject for a game, but I do tend to find, to a certain extent, I'm a little lost sometimes in terms of trying to build, like find out what I want to build and how many I should be building of certain things. And like if I'll play Japan, like I kind of feel like if I'm playing Japan, I should be doing a lot of really early and aggressive expansion, and yet I tend to find that I get clobbered very easily. So clearly I'm doing something wrong, and if I spend the time, I'm sure I will learn it. But Hearts of Iron has actually been one that I've definitely one that I've struggled to really get a good grip on. I've been able to do some stuff in the game, but it's one that I really don't quite feel like I have a mastery of yet. You tried to conquer Canada. That's funny. And hello, Crack Steve. I'm sorry if I didn't say that earlier. Captain Zerge says Stellaris is the only Paradox game that you've tried and didn't stump you one way or the other. Yeah, I mean, I think it really... One thing I will say for Stellaris, I think it's probably got... And again, keeping in mind that I haven't played CK3 yet, and I understand they did a lot of work on that. I feel like Stellaris probably has got some of the best user interfaces in the games, and I think it allows the complexity to come through. And the complexity's been added. Like, there weren't pops in the same way that they are in this current version of the game, for sure. But I definitely think that Stellaris is quite unique in its ability to communicate the complex systems in a way that gives the player a decent chance to understand it well. Canada had a more mechanized army than Germany. I didn't hear that. I do know that after Dunkirk, the Canadian Expeditionary Force was the best equipped, because of course you had to leave everything on the continent. Thank you very much for the follow, The Ruined. But no, I did not know. I did not know about a more mechanized army than Germany. That is actually rather surprising to me, given I think it was JFC Fuller was the British officer who really put. So actually, it actually wouldn't be a bad idea for me to get this name right, because this is an interesting little bit of history. JFC Fuller is this really. It's a real shame to a certain extent in terms of how everything sort of turned out for him. Because he's actually this very forward-thinking British officer who did a lot of early theory on armored warfare. So this is, you know how you kind of hear these stories about like Codex developing the CCD, but failing to capitalize on it, and it ultimately becoming the thing that disrupts its industry. There is actually something of a, you can make this kind of claim in terms of the UK, because while JFC Fuller's ideas weren't necessarily embraced in Britain, they certainly were embraced in Germany, who I suspect, if you know anything about Germany in World War II in terms of strategy, obviously, you will know a very heavy influence in terms of armored warfare. And the reason why I say it's such a shame what happened to him is that he definitely seems to have had a lot of sympathies for Germany. So far as I can tell, was if not a fascist, at least very sympathetic. I'm pretty sure he was involved with the British Union of Fascists, though. And essentially, so far as I can tell, died believing that the wrong country won the war. For those of you who like the cultist simulator stuff, he was also an occultist. So far as I can tell, he followed some of Crowley's stuff. But I always find that an interesting little bit of history, just to know that, in fact, we tend to associate things like the Blitzkrieg as a German invention, but it's in fact a British one, and it was just merely the German adoption of a British theorist's work. And I sometimes wonder if some of Fuller's political leanings just came from the fact that he had found a group of people who actually bothered to listen to him. I don't really know that much about the man, though, so. Managed to do the CNC Red Alert timeline as France in... That's really interesting. And CK3 was such a fresh tank, really focused on relationships and family trees, which you enjoyed. However, after about 100 hours, it definitely did get stale. That's a shame to hear, actually, because I know that was one of the I think one of the real challenges with the original Crusader Kings was the fact that I don't think it would be unfair to describe it as difficult to learn, easy to master. And I was sort of hoping that maybe the follow-up would have minimized that. So think to remember about World War II is that it's an oil war. The Axis was only getting about 50% of its over. So I think that's probably more for cool facts. I genuinely don't know that much about the mechanization in terms of the supply lines and such. You haven't played it since about a month or so after release, but maybe it's been changed. Great release, though. Very smooth from the get. That's good to hear. Yeah, I mean, I'm also, obviously, I think it lived in the shadow of Imperator Rome, which I actually rather liked. Even on release, I actually was happy with Imperator Rome, but I generally like the games that I play, so that's not really news. It's hard for me to dislike a game, and generally when I dislike a game, I don't like talking about why I dislike the game because there's just other stuff to play. So I have a tremendous respect for Face Punch Studios and what they've done. I have never been able to enjoy Rust. It is actually one of the rare cases where I was given a key and I did not stream the game because I disliked the experience so much, and I did not think it was in anybody's interest. Now, I feel safe saying that because Rust's success is unquestioned, and I don't think any of you are now going to not play Rust knowing that fact about me. But that is probably the only case of me actually not liking a game that I've tried. I like being easy to please. It's fun to be able to to really enjoy a lot of different games. We'll do our usual tariff. Oh, it was a Tomb World. I totally forgot. But yeah, we don't have climate restoration, so that was a waste of influence. Fortunately, I think we've already got a ship on the way to the next one, so we'll queue that up. Establishing new standards for the modeling and construction of cruisers greatly improves the efficiency of the production pipeline. So that's kind of coming a little too late, but if we wind up losing some ships, it'll help us out next time. Again, I want to try and go for the cheaper stuff. The kinetic battery, I think this is actually a downgrade, but I do want to get my weapon systems back up. So the Stellaris, what species are you? Good question, Crack Steven. Actually, we're getting close to where I need to wrap up, so just a fair warning, but it does give me a chance. For those of you that have hung out and sort of know my style by now, I feel a little bit safer than doing this immediately after No Virtue posted. But we are playing the Imutherians. Now, I tend to go for default names. There's actually the writer of the Horizon Signal kind of does the opposite, which is he really likes coming up with leader names, whereas I tend to talk a lot about species. And I think that actually probably makes sense, right? Because writers are almost certainly going to be more interested in talking about people and desires and the things that make for good drama. Whereas, somebody like me who's a bit more interested in abstract ideas, I'm probably going to be completely inhuman and not consider the individuals But in this case, we're playing the Emetherians. I'm going to talk a little bit more about how I represented it in the original formulation, because it's definitely changed over the playthrough. But we'll start off with the description and then sort of how I wanted to. We'll talk a little bit about why I built what I built here. So, accurately separating the facts and the legends about the Black Codex would require membership, and anything less than membership in the higher orders would only be accurate about 60% of the time. Reputed members have ranged from Rhizome Capital's most popular televangelist, Francis Baybury, to the unnamed head of the intelligence services of the Blessed Alari Grand Duchy. The greatest cryptographers have been stymied by the Black Codex's use of metaphorical ciphers, while the great philosophers of lesser empires lack the computational power to bear witness to the labyrinthine sermons of Matriarch Bethen. The Black Codex knows and keeps all. What they do with the information remains to be seen. So the idea here is, with the release of Nemesis, I wanted to try and do something that embraced the espionage mechanics that were added inside of the game. In fact, I know that this is Martin Anward, who was originally sort of a designer on it. I think is now attached to Victoria 3. But I believe he's known as Wiz on the forums, and I believe this was espionage was the last feature that he had talked about wanting to put into Stellaris that had not yet been added into the game. So I definitely wanted to see how that was done. It's a species of spies, exactly. And I feel a little bit okay. So I try not to sound too smug about the quotes and things like that, right? Because like Shake and Bake Colony and the Zeppelin in, I guess it's not really a Zeppelin, but like the advertising in Blade Runner, like these are not major plot points. This just comes from the fact that I've either seen those movies too much, or for whatever reason I seem to have a good memory for. Yeah, and it's definitely a bit of a secret society. You've pretty much got exactly what we're going for with this. What spy movies would the Black Codex enjoy? Well, I mean, I have to say, okay, so I'm going to be a heretic and say that I like both the old BBC adaptation of Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy with Alec Guinness. And if you've not seen Alec Guinness in something other than Star Wars, please do. He is a very good actor, and I know it's really hard to separate him from Obi-Wan Kenobi, but he does a wonderful job as George Smiley. But I actually also very much enjoyed the film adaptation with Gary Oldman. I actually think that was not very fairly treated. Now, I don't really know if the Black Codex would necessarily like Jean Le Carré, because it has absolutely none of the spiritual elements of it. But I will go back to answering Crack Steve's question, which is, I put a couple of little secret references inside there to see if people pick them up, but this is actually very much inspired by the fact that this patch is named after Philip K. Dick, who's a science fiction author that I'm very fond of. So, for instance, one reference inside of there is this idea of the metaphorical ciphers, and this is actually present inside of the book The Man in the High Castle. This is an idea that the Japanese are not necessarily better. So the Man in the High Castle takes place in an alternate history in which the Axis won World War II. And sort of any future Cold War that develops is basically between Germany and Japan. And one of the things that's described is that German technological progress is very significant. But one of the ways that the Japanese are able to still deliver coded messages is that they will use these metaphors and symbols inside of their communication. And so while the Germans are very good at sort of cracking codes, obviously they had Enigma, so they wouldn't have a need to crack Enigma. But basically the standard encryption that you would take is still not very useful if like what you're talking about is maybe something that you'd write an essay about in terms of your English class. And so that was sort of a tip of the hat to probably my favorite Philip K. Dick book. But at a deeper level, while my degree was in economics, both undergraduate and graduate, I was a research assistant in classics. And the prof that I had worked for was somebody who specifically dealt with ancient philosophy. And so I took a class. One of the reasons I got that job was I took a class on pre-Socratic philosophy with him, as well as, Hellenistic philosophy. I didn't do his Plato class, sadly. He's very good at it. Although I think his field of research is actually on ancient commentators on Aristotle, for those of you who want to get super nerdy. But the thing here is that, when we think about the Pythagoreans, we tend to think about the theorem, right? That the square of the hypotenuse is equal to the sum of the squares of the other two sides of a right-sided triangle. But it's also important to remember that this was math club. The first rule of math club is you don't talk about math club. Like you would have these things like abstain from beans and like this religious order. And for them, like this stuff made total sense, right? That the world could be explained in numbers, and actually specifically sort of whole numbers, that you could like everything could be explained by sort of these ratios of the whole numbers. And so you have this crisis that emerges with the introduction of irrational numbers, things like the square root of 2 or pi. Again, if you go far enough in history, or if you read the right books, you will get these very interesting and strange ideas. Even somebody like Isaac Newton, as far as the time he was spending, he reformed the coinage of Britain. He is a tremendous mathematician and physicist, but also considered alchemy a very worthwhile application of his time. And he, was going through the book of Revelation to try and find the date of the apocalypse. So in this case here, what I wanted to try and do was deal with this, which was I was thinking of this idea of a secret society which would be very comfortable with concepts like, Claude Shannon's information theory. They would be able to describe to you, the benefits of RSA, or perhaps where it's not enough. They would be the sort of people who would be, absolute top agents in the CSE in Canada or the NSA in the US. But simultaneously, they very much consider this to be part of a larger project, which is very much tied towards sort of the keeping and acquisition of secrets. And in this case here, sort of the secret society is very much more sort of along this Gnostic tradition of sort of like, if you want to achieve salvation, it's through knowledge, and it's hard, and not necessarily everybody's going to get it, right? And so some of the ways that I represented these ideas, so I gave them slow breeders. And the idea here was not necessarily that this is a biological trait, but simply the fact that if you create this secret society that has got highly encrypted messages that when you finally decode them as a cipher, still will have these incredibly complicated descriptions that require your understand. Like you have to have read very broadly and be familiar with sort of these esoteric teachings. That's not going to lend itself to some very broad membership, right? I said communal because, again, it sort of gives rise to these ideas of sort of monastic communities. That's probably not surprising. Traditional, again, you sort of think of these communities, these religious orders, and then intelligent because, honestly, you can't understand this sort of stuff. You can't really understand this sort of stuff if you're not smart. So I figured, intelligent would be an interesting way of modeling that. We've, of course, developed. So I've actually done some stuff which I haven't really touched in Stellaris before. So we embraced our latent psychic abilities. I don't recall how we got bioadaptability, but we did get it. I think this was from the one where you have those like mysterious vials. So I think we just picked one and we wound up with bioadaptability. And we've since removed slow breeders. So I'm kind of taking this as saying that we've gotten enough of sort of a base in the Black Codex that it's not as difficult to, we have enough of a population base to be able to sort of cover our needs. That's maybe we can say that, yes, it's true that it's still hard to sort of get in and do well. But given the fact that there have been sort of subsequent generations and that we've sort of colonized a quarter of the galaxy, that maybe there's enough orders now that we can feel okay. And more importantly, I had genetic points. I wanted to spend them, right? It's easier to build the species than it is to explain some of the choices that you make later. But of course, if you're going to do a secret society, you probably need to talk a little bit about its structure. So I definitely had the idea of something a little more hierarchical, so it seemed appropriate to do authoritarian. And then I've not really played a lot of spiritualist empires, and I definitely wanted to do something like that, both as a reference to Philip K. Dick as well as in order to sort of really embrace this idea. And so we went for a fanatic spiritualist here, just mostly because I really wanted to commit to the idea. And so the civics we chose were Exalted Priesthood. This probably makes sense on its own, the description to guard against heresy. This society is ruled by a religious council consisting of the wisest and most pious members of the clergy. And then cutthroat politics. Now, this is partly because code breaking went up when you selected it, but also I don't think this is a terrible description. So cutthroat politics. The political system in this society is renowned for its intrigue. Power struggles, shady backroom deals, and cloak and dagger scheming are par for the course. Those who survive long enough to learn the game, however, tend to learn it well. So the idea here is that because so much of this is focusing not just on the keeping of secrets, but also code breaking, the idea of being able to break a rival's codes, even if they're within the Black Codex, and to be able to steal the knowledge, that's not necessarily frowned upon, right? You want to make sure that it's done right. It's maybe not like full on, like, again, it's not that there's indifference to members of this community, but it's not frowned upon to do this sort of thing. It's important. If this is the most important thing that you can do, right, and clearly these people are committed to these ideas, then doing it right is worthwhile. We did get another civic, so I decided to go for Byzantine bureaucracy here. The society is largely governed by a complex and, to the outsider, almost labyrinthine system of bureaucracy. An army of officials and functionaries work tirelessly to keep the government running smoothly and ensure no citizens are allocated resources that they cannot demonstrate a properly filed and triple-stamped need for. The idea here is just the fact that this stuff is really hard to understand. That's kind of how I said Byzantine bureaucracy. It's not, you want to go for the driver's license and you need to do a calculus exam, but it's not straightforward. It's kind of like when people ask me questions. I never give a straightforward answer to stuff. Cool Facts is always very interested. Oh, are you ship type? You mean like in terms of design? I think I went for the same mammalian style. I tend to do this the same as my species, but let's take a quick peek. Yeah, these definitely look like mammalian ship styles. This is such a pretty game. So Cool Facts asks, how pious would you need to be to join the upper echelons? Well, think of the Catholic Church, right? I think it is fair to say that even in the, I'm sure they would not say so, but I think even cardinals are probably going to be at a point where they may have some doubts. That in some cases people may question their faith or whether or not it's worth doing all of this. But the fact of the matter is that in order to, I just think that to be able to get to these higher levels, remembering that the Black Codex is very much focused, it's not just code breaking because they're an intelligence service, but because there is that process of understanding the world and understanding the secrets, and that to them, reading a religious text and decoding its meaning and breaking a cipher, to them, these are one and the same, that you can't have the one without the other, that it is a process of gaining understanding. That's a very unique way of thinking. And it's something that ultimately these people are dedicating their lives to. And so in order to get to the top, first of all, you have to be very good. And being very good doesn't just involve being a good code breaker, but it also involves understanding these texts and this prior work that has come before, right? And so again, it's just one of these questions here where it would be very hard for me to imagine somebody who's just winging it, right? I'm sure most people who've done this have probably, I'm sure most people are probably, have done some kind of schooling who watch this stream. And, it's nothing wrong if you haven't. It's just I tend to notice from where the conversations go, I tend to be able to rely on a certain level of education. If nothing else, most of us have probably understood what it's like to kind of cram before an exam. And the thing is that to advance within the Black Codex, you got to ask, why do you do that, right? When you cram before an exam, it's because you want to get a grade. Well, why do you want to get a grade? Well, because you need to get a job. I had a situation at work recently where, so again, for those who don't know, from the 600 times I mentioned it, I'm an economist. That is both my job title and my major. One of these rare cases where you actually wind up doing the work that you studied in school. Would have loved to be a professor, ran out of money, needed to go to work somewhere. So I did. And there's a concept in statistics, which I'm not going to bother explaining right now, but called the central limit theorem. But suffice to say, it is an incredibly important result on which a lot of work relies. And I had some coworkers, people actually in a position to say whether or not my work went into a particular presentation or something in this case, who were unfamiliar with it, then asked me for a demonstration of it, and were still skeptical following this very fundamental result on which I can assure you anything they would have done would have relied on. And, to a certain extent, it's fine, right? Because some of the stuff that you learn in school, you don't always retain. But it's like, it was one of those, it's one of the reasons why I sometimes express unhappiness about my work situation is because that stuff is happening a little bit more often. And the challenge is that the reason, like, this is not the best paying option that I had in terms of my work. I went there because I thought I would have access to some data that I wouldn't have otherwise, and sort of a little more public spirited type of a job. Whereas the alternative was like a consulting firm where, I do transfer pricing, help people avoid paying taxes on stuff. So it's a little young to quite sell my soul. So the thing is that it's possible to, so far as I can tell, it is possible to work in my work environment and be someone who is put into a position of minor authority and not understand what I would consider to be fundamental knowledge to work effectively in the field that you do, right? This is somebody who's been educated, they got a master's degree from a good university, and yet this really important thing has now sort of passed them to a point that they express skepticism when it's demonstrated. I didn't do like a full mathematical proof because honestly you can go to a textbook for that and I'd just be quoting a textbook. But I did like a demonstration with the data that we had. The central limit theorem just tells you there's a certain shape that the averages of data will take past a certain number of draws. So why am I going on this, why am I dealing with work stuff? It's to basically point out that, like, so you can see why somebody gets to this point, right? They do well in school, they do well enough that they're able to go into graduate school, getting that extra piece of paper potentially gives you access to better job prospects, and those job prospects will pay you better. And so if the focus is on the job, then you're not necessarily going to want to care about a lot of the theory. You're not necessarily going to care about how the model is derived, or you're not necessarily going to care about some of the assumptions required to get the result that you're doing. You just want the job, you just want the paycheck, and oftentimes doing well in a job can mean getting along very well with certain people. Now, in the terms of the Black Codex, there isn't that same incentive. Like, why do you want to advance inside of the Black Codex? If you are working in these you're working both in a secret society and an intelligence service, both of which are very secretive in nature. There's no fame, there's no big paycheck. Because the society is organized around it, I think, there's probably some degree. I mean, obviously you don't want to be a slave in this society, but it's kind of hard to see what the major reward for advancement is other than the inherent, the inherent benefits that would be coming from it. It'd sort of be like thinking of these religious communities. So like something like Mount Athos, which is sort of like a monastic community for Eastern Orthodoxy. It's an island specifically dedicated to these religious people. Like, I don't know if there's someone there who wants to like become the head, or if you go to a community like that because you want to pursue a particular calling or a particular wish. Again, like the thing is I'm not particularly religious. I obviously find the stuff interesting enough to talk about it in the context of my game, but I don't really know what it's like to sort of be driven by those kinds of desires, or those callings, or however you want to put it. So to answer the question, I suspect there's a certain degree of piety, just because, like, what else would motivate someone to reach those higher levels? In the end, it's sort of, satisfaction with a job well done seems to really be the only reward. Or, its religious equivalent. Sorry, that was probably a longer answer than you wanted, but it was a chance for me to hit a few targets. You like to think that we're looking at a strategic map, that's not practical at the scale. Oh, sorry, because you just thought of something. Stellaris' scale of ships is so big that they would demolish things like Star Wars and Halo. Yeah, the thing is that if you talk about like Europa Universalis or the other grand strategy games, like they're also the ones that have like a giant man walking on the map. So presumably the armies would like level villages just by walking through them, if we want to follow it. So I think that's probably the Clausewitz engine, probably speaking more than everything being to scale in the game. By the way, I'm a little conscious of the hour. I did want to sort of run through some of my systems, and well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to see if there's any capital buildings that I can move up. If anybody has any questions or anything else that they want, now would maybe be a good time to mention them, because I'm probably going to have to wrap up. However, I do remember Coolfax wanted to see some of the other species that I'd made, and I'd be delighted to share them with you. But as far as gameplay is concerned, I think I'm going to have to leave my bigger decisions for a future playthrough, probably next week, because I also have... Oh, sorry, there's one other thing that I wanted to mention about it. One other thing in the creation of the Black Codex, which wasn't something that I originally planned, but I really liked how this turned out, was the origins. So this is the first time I've played Remnants. The civilization once spanned the void, controlling much of the galaxy. They were eventually defeated and almost destroyed, but after a long period of destitution, they are returning to the stars. So the way that I work this out for myself is that the Black Codex is the intelligence services of this former empire. But the thing that is, and I haven't sorted this out for myself because I don't actually think you need to fully build out a world to talk about it, is that I don't know if this intelligence service always had this quasi-religious component to it, or if it was by virtue of the fact that they were the ones who survived the downfall of this larger empire. And sort of through that dark age that the religious aspects came through. Obviously, we talked about this last week. This is definitely a little bit like Warhammer 40k and the Imperium of Man. But, I mean, they don't have a monopoly on obviously Warhammer 40k is drawing from history just like everything else is, right? So what nations are you guys enemies with in this game, Steve? So the tricky part here is that we are kind of have a natural rival with the Icknerval archivists because they are materialist. We're slowly closing the gap with them, but we definitely don't want the war to start. And everybody went up and became spiritualists on us. So the former Great Horde is a natural expansion target. The Vitresis Hive was the advanced start. They still rate as superior to me in terms of fleet strength, and you can see it just in terms of their fleets as well. We're slowly building up our infiltration level again. But I would definitely say the Vitresis Hive are rivals in spirit, not formally, and the Zaxoid Stellar Confederation are sort of in a similar boat, but right now, because it is in my interest to make sure that we have a united front against the Vitresis Hive, I want to stay on good terms with them. So right now I don't have any rivals just because we've been dealing with too many crises and because I've been largely isolated. Doash 369, I am doing quite well, although I'm just getting ready to wrap up, so I may be disappointing you a little bit. But I do want to, there were some closing questions in that. I did want to at least set up what next week's plans are going to be. So there is something of an argument for me to try and pursue the galactic, to try and pursue the, oh, thank you very much for the follow. There's definitely an argument for me to pursue the I can never remember the name of the custodian. The trick here is that I also want to have enough political support to be able to like go all the way, like get rid of the term limits and to, to really like throw my weight around on this. And so the tricky part here is that I know I can become the custodian. The question is whether or not I'm going to be able to develop enough political support over the time to be able to like really do what I want. So the way I'm kind of approaching this is to just start storing a little bit more influence. I will definitely still expand, but maybe at just a slower rate. Once we've got the Jomprun system, there's really no more worlds to take over, and this hopefully gives our this gives our bureaucratic worlds a little bit more chance to catch up on the Empire Sprawl. One thing I was meaning to do was, for some of the more full worlds, I want to start replacing the gene clinics with strongholds. That'll help me with my naval capacity. And then we also have a lot of slack in the, as far as the Navy is concerned, just because I've got a bunch of star bases with unused expansion slots. So some of these are going to be dedicated towards the protection of trade routes, but even more of them are actually going to be dedicated towards just anchorages and such. So a lot of that development is going to be happening in the next few rounds. It should have been over on this play session, except that we ran out of the alloys. The contracts are over, and it's pretty clear that the strain on alloys between the war and the Gearoids and the Zaxoids, they're raising the prices in the galaxy, and they're making it hard for me to get those trade deals filled. And then what I didn't appreciate, I always thought that once the L cluster event pops up, you were able to go through them, and maybe I already have, because we're obviously able to get one ship in the in there to see the Tempest shoals, but yeah, it's 34k strength fleet. It's definitely something that we're yep, there's the galactic market. I didn't get it. I was actually quite weak at the time that bidding started happening, so I have to pay the 30% off. I could probably steal it from the Zaxoid Stellar Confederation, but yeah, I sadly have to pay up. The Iknurval are a fallen empire. I'm pretty sure there's a spiritualist empire kicking around here somewhere. It's probably here, but we've not actually met them yet because we closed our borders with the Vitresis Hive, and they usually tend to close their borders with me. But yeah, so I am definitely thinking... So I'm thinking about how I can do the coup to kind of corner galactic politics. I'm getting to the point where I really just need one other person to side with me on an action. But we're not quite there. So I'm like trying to think of maybe trying to get a federation with the Zaxoids, and then sort of trying to set myself up will help me out, or try to get favors or something like that. Anyways, it's definitely an avenue that I'm considering alongside boosting up my fleet strength. Other than that, it's kind of back to what we've normally been working on. I still need to get the Empire Sprawl down. I also need to get my consumer goods back in order. And of course, in order to get Empire Sprawl down, you need to build administrative complexes. Administrative complexes need consumer goods. And so as always, there's that eternal struggle between the two, although we've got more energy credits than I know what to do with, so that's not like a major problem. I'm going to get out of the game here just so that I don't give the illusion that I'm going to be doing more in-game events. However, there was the request for some other species that I've done. So here are some examples of species that I've done before. I'm actually going to start by referring to two of the species mentioned in the Black Codex, because again, the idea here is that this secret society would attract the kind of person who would do well in intelligence services, and so you have that question in terms of the loyalty of your agents. So the Blessed Alari Grand Duchy. From each according to their ability, so it is written on the walls of the First Temple, and so it has remained. Alari society is one of exchange and service. The rigid hierarchy belies very active social mobility, with the bright amassing great fortunes, and the slow losing it all and being reduced to slaves. The Grand Duke oversees this dynamic system, and all seek to emulate his wisdom and shrewd dealing, lest the next generation erase all the gains that have been made. Everyone and everything has its price, and it will find it inside the Blessed Alari Grand Duchy. So I didn't actually appreciate how close this was to to a couple of things. Like the Black Codex is spiritualist and authoritarian as well, but in a totally different way. So this is one where I think this Humanoids had just come out, so I wanted to try and take advantage of some of the, the space Rome aspects inside of that. We went for Decadent. I wanted to try something a little bit more unpleasant. Obviously wanted to play off on the very famous, Marxist quote. But I really wanted to try something about, very much centered around the feudal society and the slavery mechanics and such. And then the totally different alternative would be Rhizome Capital, which I know some of you have heard before. This one was Rhizome Capital is pleased to announce that it has successfully completed its first round of seed capital. Our plants are already running at full capacity, getting ready to offer you the finest goods and services the galaxy has to offer. Tax season got you down? Our bean counters at Deloitte are licensed in all jurisdictions and legal systems. Need help with housework? Rhizome Robotics solar-powered photosynthetic assistants are ready to attend your every need. Under the sage guidance of Ebenezer Hawthorne, we'll make you green. Rhizome Capital, leaf growth to the experts. So in honor of Megacorps, I did an entire species based around growth puns and the Plantoid DLC. This is probably one of my favorite species to have played. But yeah, this was our... Thank you. I was really happy to write them. But yeah, so Francis Baybury is a televangelist and the unnamed head of the Blessed Alari Grand Duchy. You don't need to know it, so they don't, you don't know. But both of these are potential candidates. I will do one more because I actually, hang on, I think I've already done one other one that I, kind of liked in terms of inverting some of the ideas. So. In Stellaris, if you're a spiritualist empire, you definitely don't like AIs. And so I wanted to play around a little bit with that idea here I think this is actually the first machine empire I played when Synthetic Dawn came out. So we went for driven assimilators, and they're rock breakers. Their traits were machine, bulky, uncanny, recycled, and mass-produced. And what's important to remember about this... Wait a minute. They're recommending Necroids for a machine empire? How would that even work? I don't know. Anyways. So the important thing to remember about the driven assimilator is that you actually have... Oh yeah, no, we did one with lithoids. Did you want to see that one instead? I already said this one before, and like it's going to be like the third religious one that I had. So this one I wanted to try Inward Perfection, but this is the one where I sort of took the idea of cargo cults. So this was when lithoids came out first. So and this one I took the idea of radio preachers, cargo cults, and apparently the fact that sort of radio waves from Earth sort of radiate out into the universe indefinitely. So the reading of Luke chapter 19 that Samuel Parks Cadman gave on the morning of November 10th, 1929 did not produce any significant remarks at the time, yet it has broadcast out into space ever since. At exactly 11:13 local time, the broadcast reached the planet Zur, quote, and said to him, Master, rebuke thy disciples. And he answered and said unto them, I tell you that, if these should hold their peace, the stones would immediately cry out, was intoned across the planet, coinciding with the sudden achievement of the sentience among the local Zurite clusters. The Zuritan populace have since built grand cathedrals to the creator Gospel Luke and continue to meditate on its existence to this day. So the idea here was that this, Zurite, this rock, happened to become conscious at exactly the moment that some Samuel Parks Cadman was an actual radio preacher. That basically, through sheer coincidence, this is kind of almost going Douglas Adams territory here, that rather, apropos passage was sort of crossing over the planet at the time that they gained consciousness. And so this is their creation myth. They know it as Gospel Luke. They've created great cathedrals to it. And this was my attempt to do inward perfection while also playing a lithoid species. So, and again, like it's sometimes fun just to kind of try and come up with these ideas. I don't actually go out of my way to come up with these usually. One of the first ones was the Oklar citizen state. So, you're never gonna guess the origins of this. This will be the last one I go into because I really should host someone. I'm assuming I've probably lost most of the audience at this point, but a lot of these have prosperous unification because it predates the origins. I should maybe go back and rewrite some of these, but have you done your part? Originally a slogan designed to sell consumer goods 2 decades into a war that engulfed Glira. It was adapted by Ardig den Badir to unite the people to press on in the Great War. While the borders did not change, the Oklari united behind his leadership until he was world president in all but name. Thank you very much for the follow, The Crunch. Declining to serve a second term, he was followed by his 2 sons. Under their rulership, the Oklar have finally taken to the stars, but as the Great War recedes into memory, can the Society's martial traditions be held by a mere advertising slogan? So this is because I had already decided on deviants. I think Lady Dow had asked for a sloth species, so I think that's where I went for on that one. But I like the idea of deviants because of the shift in governing ethics, and this is actually one of the examples of a playthrough that I really enjoyed because the game took it to a different direction than I wanted. Because as it happened, the following rulers that were elected were also named Den Badir, that it seemed to be that while it was an ostensibly democratic society, and you have the tension already inside of the write-up, right? That you have, this military leader that comes up and, they do the Washington moment of, declining to run again. This is, they're not going to become king. It's democratic society and they're living it. It's always been the same last name that has been governing. And so I wanted to allow for the possibility that the game, yes, it is The Crunch. All of these, thank you, Static Saturn. Every single one of these species has a write-up like these. Every single one of these have been the result of usually a new DLC coming out. They all have backstories. They all have this level of thought put into them. And this is one of the reasons why I really like... this is actually one of the reasons I really like Stellaris, because I've just slowly been generating this entire science fiction universe, through progressively playing. So, and again, it's important to remember that you can actually make it so this allows it to spawn, this forces it to spawn. So if I want, I can do a game with every single one of these creations sort of playing with each other. Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not doing an Asimov thing, right? Like, I just do this stuff to amuse. Okay, sorry, I lied. I am actually going to do a couple more because you guys seem to be interested in these ideas. My personal favorite is I really like the Lithoid. But yeah, I think it's fair to say that they are. Like, there's no significance to it, but obviously, the Black Codex makes reference to to Rhizome Capital and the Blessed Delari Grand Duchy. But yeah, so like this one, the same last name kept cropping up over and over again in this playthrough. So the thing is like, okay, maybe this is the story of like the sort of the removal from democratic values of the Oklar citizen state, that essentially it is becoming this dynasty. And then one of the sons unexpectedly died. And then I'm like, okay, democracy is saved. They're still going. Oh, thank you so much, Static Saturn. That's very kind of... Well, I mean, obviously, people have been going nuts with their subs in this little friendship cluster. I don't expect people to sub. I like it when people hang out and get to share this cool stuff. Oren, you as well. Thank you very much. I am trying to wrap up, guys, but it's fun to be able to talk about this stuff because it's what makes Stellaris a really special game for me. Hello to you, Oren. It was nice to see you in Brian's chat as well. But yeah, this I liked this because this is where the game... I was going one direction, and then the events in the game, turn them another direction. But if you guys want to know the origin of this one, I think I was reading a little bit. I think for some reason I was probably reading about George Washington, because the decision not to run again is pretty clear from that. But the "Have you done your part" thing, this is actually the fact that the Johnny Walker slogan, "Keep walking," has actually been used by like revolutionary movements and like protests. And I just really liked this idea of this incredibly effective little bit of marketing being repurposed for military ends and actually bringing about world peace. So that's really kind of you to say, Steve. And the Crunch is sharing. Again, this isn't... I have the bully pulpit, but this doesn't mean that I'm not interested. Actually, this is another thing I can say about No Virtue. No Virtue also writes science fiction short stories. So the Crunch says, I made a lithoid hive mind and a plantoid in response to the elements taking stuff back. That's a really fun idea. I like that a lot. So I'll tell you what, I'll do 2 more and then I need to wrap it up. But thank you very much. For those of you who weren't here earlier on, Static Saturn is somewhat new to Twitch, but somebody I know through Brian on the Rocks, a developer at Respawn, and is definitely a very fun streamer to watch, who has invited me as a guest. And actually, Oren, Static Saturn, and Esquano have had to put up with me talking like this in the middle of their games. So they're very patient people. But yeah, so like some of the origins of these species are really like trivial or silly places to go. But I think sometimes there's fun in doing that, right? Sometimes you have a game mechanic you're interested in. Sometimes you have, sometimes you have a thing that you read. So I'll do 2 more because there's No, 2 more. So, 1 hive mind. I haven't actually done that many hive minds just because all the other DLC keep bringing out new government types. So this is the Hazar Collective. At the dawn of Hazari FTL travel, their homeworld Pogavon was embroiled in a world war, driven over disputes as to the colonization rights of the planets that they hoped to discover. One Hazar thought to move past the petty squabbles that had held the Hazar back for millennia and would unite them once and for all. Not through military conquest, but through achieving the final stage of their evolution. Through his network of contacts, he placed the virus in key cities around Povagon. As the armies claimed victory, they were infected and turned to serve the swarm. The Hazar are finally united in purpose, and the colonization may begin. So, as soon as I saw this, I knew I had to do a species with this kind of with this look. But the idea essentially was that this is the mad scientist origin, right? That basically the mad scientist, tired of the world wars, put, the fungus in key locations that ultimately transformed the species into a hive mind, and that the bodies are essentially vessels for the greater consciousness. So far, it's the only hive mind that I've done as a hive mind. I'd really like to do another hive mind though. But of course, hive minds were transformed to Gestalt consciousness with the new machine intelligence. This is the one I was going to do before. And this one I actually played around with spiritualist beliefs. Because when you make this, there's actually 2 biographies, but I only get to show you the one here. But basically, there is a species that you've assimilated, which is below, and you can write a biography for those. So I'll give you the broad strokes in terms of where this one went. But this was when Synthetic Dawn came out. So the planet known as 01 was home to a monastic order known as the Savelli, dedicating themselves to move beyond the pursuit of transitory knowledge and learn of truths eternal. To that end, they fashioned a servitor race dedicated to the accumulation and caretaking of transitory knowledge in all its forms. The Savelli passed beyond this realm, and their servitors, the Techaris, were left to fulfill their mandate. Time passed, 01 was covered in ice, and the caretaker finally understood its purpose and went out into space to account for and incorporate all organic life. Thank you, Crack Steve. The thing is, I don't actually read or write that much fiction. I haven't written any fiction. I write essays, but maybe I should embark on a new career. So the trick is that there's another part to this story, which is if you actually take a look at the race that is assimilated, the idea behind this one. So the reason why the Savelli are allowed to have these robots is the idea that for them, there is the division between spiritual beliefs and spiritual knowledge and the things that you have to deal with in the mundane world, and that it is completely appropriate to have mundane things handle mundane work. They do not see the Techaris as being artificial life. they are machines to do certain tasks, and they have that clear division. They're also wrong, because if you read the bio, actually, you know what? I could probably put it here. So cyborg species. Yeah. So there it is here. Biography. The Sveli died. Their home was maintained by the Tekkaris as their bodies decayed in their temples and as the planet cooled and turned to ice. The caretaker studied these remains and set to work restoring them. The Sveli live on in a state of cybernetic reanimation, pursuing transitory knowledge, just as the caretaker was ordered. So the idea here is that this is kind of a zombie story, that the Tekkaris multisystem has now kind of become the Borg, where it's going to be cataloging and incorporating all life into the system, but the spiritualist species, which had created this machine to basically deal with the mundane world so that they could focus on eternal truths, they died out, and they have been reanimated in service of this goal. So that was a fun one. I wish there were more opportunities to kind of add a little bit of biography in terms of the subspecies and such, but that was one of the things I like doing if I can, is to mess around a little bit with some of the definitions inside of Stellaris species. So needless to say, one day I would really like to do a big grand map with all of the species that I've come up with before. It's kind of sad because I know like some of these are going to win and some of these are not. But it'd be interesting to see which one of these comes out. And needless to say, I like all of them. I had a lot of fun making them. I always worry when I make a new species because I'm never sure if the ideas is going to be as good as some of the others that I've done. But you've all been very, very kind in your comments, and also very kind with your attention, because I know the last little while has really been... Oops. Advertising. I know a lot of this has been more, Stellaris adjacent or more meta Stellaris. But I really want to stress this. Like, this is very much why I find Stellaris interesting, to be able to talk about, science fiction that interests you. All of the DLC are named after science fiction authors. There's just so much. There's so much to share. There's so much to talk about in Stellaris, and it's an opportunity to just kind of explore ideas, everything that good science fiction's about, really. And so to me, being able to talk about the species and share some of the things that I've made over the course of the game is, to me, is as important and as rewarding as being able to make the numbers go up is. Which species would you play in the game? I'd probably make a new species. I would probably do to break my heart, I would probably do like a supervillain species which becomes the Crisis and wants to destroy them all. And like maybe I just set it to a high difficulty level so that I get beaten by my own creations. Anyways, guys, there's a lot of you, and I think a lot of you are here for Stellaris, so I'm going to raid a streamer. I don't know who this is, but I do see that Popo Panda says new campaign Necro Megacorp. So I figure with a new campaign, it'd be nice to sort of keep things in Stellaris territory, to be able to give a to pass things on, hopefully a streamer that you enjoy. I don't know who this is, so I hope you enjoy it. I hope they do a good job of entertaining you. If you want to do a raid message, this is what we normally write, but I don't know them, so please don't feel the need to like bombard them in terms of attention. But I figure, especially because No Virtue was so kind in giving me a nice big host, the least that I can do is pass that on to somebody who's playing a similar game. Yeah, no problem, Warren. Just a word for what's going on. Tomorrow there's going to be a pre-recorded Oblivion episode. Wednesday, which is a normal stream day for me, is a local game dev meetup, so I will be hosting that, but very likely not playing anything. Thursday is my birthday, so I will be streaming for that. I'm not 100% sure what yet, but if you have something you'd like to see, let me know. And then finally, Friday is a free day. That's going to be a day where I have I've got an open slot. That's going to be wonderful. So I need to work that out for myself. But anyways, thank you everyone. I hope you enjoy Popo Panda, and until next time, whether that's in a week or whether that's, in a couple of days, have a good one. Thank you for sharing this game with me, and we'll see you then.